Could please stand for opening of meeting with a moment of silent meditation and prayer, and then a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2 on the agenda, public comment on any agenda item. Do we have anybody who would like to make comment? Seeing no one come forward. Number 3 on the agenda, approval of council minutes for meeting date August 27, 2018. Do we have any additions or corrections?
Yeah, I have a few corrections. Number 4 in the meeting minutes, in the first paragraph, that has to be changed. It can be changed to say, Sloan asked if we are authorized to increase the tax by a 1 mil increment without a ballot referendum. Pizzo said he believes it's required to put the question on the ballot because the total millage would be above 3 mils.
Okay, do we have any other?
I think Mr. Pizzo should see, because that's,
I want to, yeah,
he's changing what Mr. Pizzo said, so I think Mr. Pizzo should be aware of where he sits down. I don't think that's exactly what he said.
it is. I went back and checked the tape.
Okay, well,
Now that Mr. Pizzo is here, Jesse, would you
That's fine.
make that change
Sure,
again,
yeah.
please?
So it's number 4. This is the discussion that we had on the fire tax increase. I had asked if we're authorized to increase the tax, and it needs to be corrected here. If we're authorized to increase the tax by a 1 mil increment without a ballot referendum, Pizzo had stated that he believes it's required to put the question on the ballot. And when I inquired, he said it was because the total millage would be above 3 mils. Mr. Pizzo, does that sound correct to you?
I know that I said I believe it is required for us to place the question on the ballot. I don't know that
I think your answer was more than one sentence long. It was.
Oh, it
10
was,
minutes.
and I had asked a question, a follow-up,
Yeah, but
of if it was,
you clarifying it down to a point where I said this and he said that doesn't make the record correct. You can delete some, but.
are you proposing an alternate?
No, I think.
I'm still looking for it
I
on
was
the.
here, and that's not what happened, but you can say all you want.
Okay, so I think at first we can agree that
Just
I
'cause you-
asked
just
if
'cause
we
you
are
say,
authorized to
correct me.
increase the tax by a 1 mil increment without a ballot referendum. That was my question. And then Pizzo said he believes it's required to put the question on the ballot. He did say that. When then Sloan asked if it was because the total millage would be above 3 mils. Pizzo said yes. And if there's any question, I encourage anyone to go back and watch the tape.
Well, I think they should type out exactly what was said by both parties instead of.
Well, again, I'm.
a certain way.
I obviously said what I said. I don't know that I said that the tax was above 3 mils. I don't know that I ever said
No,
what
I
the
had said
current
that.
amount of the tax was.
My question had been to asking why that this was necessary. I specifically asked you if it was because the total millage would be above 3 mils.
I remember what was said. I didn't re-listen to it, but I think it was said. There was confusion.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we table it? I'll go back, I'll take a look at what I said,
Yeah.
and then we can.
That's fine. I just want to clarify. That's all. Thank you.
Paraphrase.
So we're going to put this on the agenda for the next meeting, because the Pizzo, we can go back to the tape and find out what's going on, or Cindy get the tape out.
Sure, I said whatever I said.
Let's make it right, so.
Number 8, the consideration of minor land development for the Corman Commercial Properties at 2577 Interplex Drive. On page 4 of the minutes, it said Sloan motion to approve as amended with pedestrian crosswalk at new entrance and shrubs approved by traffic engineer. I'd also like to add to that and a no idling signs. That was something that was mentioned in paragraph above. I know that was part of the motion. I want to make sure that's official on the record.
Thank you, Cindy. We'll check that one.
Yep.
Get the message out. Let's get this done. Guess you have any other?
Number 18, other business. I had asked for an update on the replacement of Mr. Takita, and the mayor did provide us with an update on the search for a new director of building and planning. And that had been left out.
Okay, so we'll get all these things added back in, and anything anybody else has, and we'll vote on this the next meeting with what actually happened. Does anybody else have any additions or corrections? Okay. Just gonna put that aside, and we'll hear it next meeting. Joe, do we need a motion to put this to the next meeting? I don't believe we would.
No, that's fine. You'll just adopt them at your next meeting. Or not.
All right, number 4 on the agenda, consideration of a resolution regarding the Bensalem Police Pension Plan to reduce or eliminate participant contributions below the mandated rate of 5% of compensation subject to certain conditions on an annual basis. Mr. Chakowski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. There are 2 pension items that I need to present to Council. Every year at this time is required I read into the Township Record information in compliance with Pennsylvania's Act 205. The first requires no action by Council. The 2019 minimum municipal obligation financial requirements for the police, non-uniform, and non-uniform defined contribution pension funds have been prepared. The police defined benefit pension requirement is $3,345,308. The non-uniform defined benefit is $744,580. And the non-uniform defined contribution pension plan is $122,500. Again, that requires no action by Council. Secondly, there's an annual required resolution for decreasing the police pension payroll deduction for the year 2018 to 3.5%. There is a resolution that would require Council's action. So if you have any questions, I'm here for them.
So they've contributed enough to the pension plan, so the funds are reducing it by 1.5%.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for John?
Is this any effect on township contributions coming out of our budget?
No, the state prepares the minimum municipal obligation that we have to contribute. The employee contributions obviously offset that somewhat, but it really has no bearing on it. For the current contract that was adopted January 1st, 2018, it was increased to 3.5% from 2.5%. So police do recognize if there's additional funding needed, they will put in for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, number 5 on the agenda is a consideration of resolution authorizing the application of a municipal grant to the Redevelopment Authority of Bucks County for $388,571 for emergency radios. John, you're handling that?
Do you have to approve that resolution?
Oh, I thought there was one
The resolution for the pension.
that's this one?
Yes, sorry about
Form
that.
a motion that we approve it as presented.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it 5-0, sorry.
That's good.
Okay, the municipal grant for the redevelopment authority for the radios, you handling that?
I'll handle all the RDA
Okay, go
grants.
ahead.
Yep. So the resolution that's in front of you is an annual, this is the next 3 resolutions. This are all to apply for the annual RDA grant through the Redevelopment Authority. This particular one is for the radios. Years back, the federal government changed the guidelines on the police radios and fire radios, and we had to issue new radios to everyone. This money that we apply for will go to the township and the volunteer fire companies and the rescue squad to help pay for their annual payment for the replacement of the radios.
Okay, do we have any questions?
So this is an ongoing project to upgrade the radios, and is there an annual payment that gets
Yeah.
made for this?
So yes, there's an annual payment. I think we have about 3 years left on the annual payment.
Okay.
It was a county-wide bond issuance. They proceeded, then in turn, asked all the municipalities, volunteer fire companies, rescue squads, how many radios they needed. And then basically what happens is the county gets paid on an annual basis from all the different agencies. If you need a radio today, you just go out and buy it without the bond issue through county. But in the beginning, when we had to buy everyone one, that's what it was for.
Okay.
Was that like 10 years ago or so, at least?
Yes, I believe so.
So this was really something that we had to do because it was required. I think it came out of 9/11.
Correct, yeah, they had to
Yeah.
change the bandwidths and everything like that.
Do you know what the annual payment is?
About 168,000 is the township's portion. I don't know what the other fire companies and rescue squads portions are. And obviously, if the RDA grant does not get approved, the township's still responsible to make that payment. It's budgeted for in the township's budget as well.
Okay, and if we get the full amount, then that offsets the township portion, that the rest go to the fire companies? and
It's all
EMS?
percentaged out based on what everyone's, like, we get from all the different fire companies what their payment was for the year, and then we divvy it all up and
It's kind of prorated based on each?
prorated so everyone
Okay.
gets their fair share.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second. Okay.
Joe. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Vote aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. You can have the next one. Next tie you'll get.
Ed, you got coffee, so, yeah.
Number 6 on the agenda, consideration of resolution authorizing the application of a municipal grant to the Redevelopment Authority of Bucks County for $700,000 for emergency equipment for the 6 volunteer fire companies and EMS. John?
Again, this is another resolution for the application towards the RDA annual grant program. As we did last year, $700,000 is being requested for the 6 volunteer fire companies and the rescue squad. And then should it get approved, the agencies will provide proof of payment, and the township will reimburse them as long as it's in the guidelines of the grant.
And what are the guidelines with respect
They
to?
can use it for debt reduction or equipment.
And this, just to clarify, this is the 6 volunteer fire.
Just volunteer fire companies and the rescue squad.
So it's not exactly like this would get split up into 7 equal pieces, it's,
Everyone gets $100,000.
oh, it is that
Yep.
way? Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Pretty quick
Thank you.
division there.
Any other questions? If not, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution as presented.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Any questions on the motion?
No, I mean, I guess the concern is that we had approved the referendum for the fire companies, but we're only splitting this, and so they're only getting $100,000 per company, correct?
Yes,
And they can still put this towards fire equipment, though?
towards,
The fire equipment?
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
There's no guarantee that they're going to get this money, though, either. Because
Oh, there's
obviously- No. So these are just our applications. Other municipalities throughout the township submit their applications to, throughout the county, submit their applications to the redevelopment authority as well. And it's whatever the redevelopment authority feels is best suited to divvy out the money.
Now, we apply for this every year, correct?
We do. Well, we applied, the $700,000 was the first one last year.
Okay.
The radios and the next one, the Towns Against Graffiti, we apply for every year.
And historically, how have these been awarded? Have we gotten these in the
The
past?
Towns Against Graffiti has been always awarded. The radios we did not get last year. The equipment we did get for the fire, or the fire grant, we did receive that one.
So if we were to receive this grant, would it offset some of the need for a full 1 mil increase on the?
No. I don't believe so.
And why not? Do we know about
I don't
how
know.
much?
I don't know. The volunteer fire companies would be better suited to answer that. I
Okay.
don't know their finances.
Okay.
I think they were looking for being able to do 5-year and 10-year plans. And be
That's
able to count
right,
on
that's what I
money.
thought.
So if you have 1 year, you get it, 1 year you don't,
Yeah.
1 year you may get it.
There's no, like I said, there's
Yeah.
no guarantee that they could count on this money every year.
Okay.
To be able to budget appropriately.
There's no way you can guarantee they're even going to get it this year, so.
Correct.
That 1% is very important, too.
Okay.
1 mil is
1
very
mil,
important.
yep.
And
So-
the graffiti
We're
thing
doing that
is
next.
a shared
Yep.
effort, right?
Yeah, through
Yep,
fire
we'll get to that
township.
one next.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions, then we call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Next one, consideration of intergovernmental agreement to participate in the grant application for Towns Against Graffiti.
Sure. This application, again, is for us to apply for the Towns Against Graffiti. It's been a program that the mayor started, I'm going to say 20 years ago or so. It's a multi-municipality program throughout Bucks County. Basically, the gentleman goes around and removes graffiti anywhere that's reported in any of the municipalities that are members of the program.
It's a great program. I know that any business people that have been involved with this or have been perpetrated the crime of graffiti on their walls are happy as can be when they find out and don't know about this program, and they find out about it, it's like, wow, and it's not going to cost me anything?
Correct.
And it's kind of like the broken glass type syndrome where you want to clean up real quick before too many glass panes become broken and it becomes a habit.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, a second. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Vote aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Chakowski.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, number 8 on the agenda is for discussion purposes only. There will be no public comment on it because we're not voting on anything. It's just to discuss a future ordinance coming through. Discussion regarding a proposed ordinance pertaining to residency requirements for personnel. So I'm going to open this up for discussion as to what you guys want to see in this ordinance so that we can get it ironed out, get it down on paper, and get it up for a vote.
Okay. With the version presented in front of us, I had a couple questions. Let's see, the changes to, looks like Part 1, Chapter 2, Article 4, Section 2-81. There's a requirement here, or let's see, the sentence that says this residency requirement shall not apply to any individual who is serving as the director of a department on or before January 1st, 1994, and has continuously served as the director of a department thereafter. What's the reason for this 1994 restriction? Is there somebody that's currently employed that might be grandfathered in? Is that what this is?
Yes.
Well, it's a grandfather.
I understand, but is this
Yes,
does
there
this
was.
apply to somebody
Yes, there
specific?
is.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is before any of us on this board that.
No, it's
that
already in
happened,
the code, I
right.
believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think, generally, you can't make a new law and make it retroactive for people. if
Oh, no,
they-
I understand
yeah,
that. I just wanted to make sure that,
Ultimately, Mr. Sloan, it was just to avoid creating a situation I don't think anyone intended to create. So to the extent that there's anyone currently on the books who was grandfathered as a director initially, we figured it was cleanest and safest just to continue to.
well,
to keep
I guess
that.
maybe I should rephrase my question. Is there anybody of the department heads right now that this applies to?
That this would apply to the grandfathering.
Sure, Bill Samori.
Bill
Yeah,
Smart.
the only possible one would be Bill Samore. I
Okay.
don't know, I wasn't on the board.
Bill Samore is the only one.
He's the only one? Okay.
I mean, I think Fred was an employee, but he wasn't the director.
No, he wasn't a department head. Let's see, on the next section for, let's see, under letter B, Part 1, Article 7, Part 1, Chapter 2, Article 7, Section 2-163. What's the source of both the 5-year requirement and the 12-mile requirement?
Sure. The 12-mile, as we told you previously, we took a look at what the different collective bargaining agreements provide for currently. And for recent or new hires of the township who would be covered by a collective bargaining agreement, 12 miles was the largest distance that measured by miles or measured by distance among those agreements. So we, for lack of any other reason than
They're both
that was-
cherry-picked out of
that
the
was
collective bargaining
yeah,
agreements.
that was the most, that
What
was the
what
largest of
What were
them.
the two choices? Because I was
well-
understanding it was our police contract that had 12.
Yes, police for more recent hires, it's
So where was
12
the other
miles.
cherry pick from? What was it? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
The other bargaining agreements have, in the case of Public Works, it's measured by 30 minutes. For grandfathered hires, new hires have to live in the township. For I forget which one of the other bargaining units, I believe, has 8 miles as a distance. And so this was among the people who are being hired today, either under a collective bargaining agreement or not. 12 miles would be the largest distance that any new hire would be permitted to live outside of the township, if they were permitted to live outside of the township.
My question relative to that, Joe, was, I think I had asked this one time before, is this as the odometer when your car reads 12 miles, or is it as the crow flies from point A to point B?
It's as the crow flies measured from any of the geographic borders of the township. At
Now-
least as we're proposing here.
So general, just to give me and other people a general idea, because we don't have a crow, I don't think, but you know, if we.
We can get them.
We get, as Doylestown is approximately 15 miles, 20 miles?
So that's about a 20-mile drive.
20 miles, so 12 miles would be Langhorne, Middletown, Warminster. That's like,
Understand that if council is of a mind to do this, you can set it at any number you want. We were, so as not to be completely arbitrary, we were trying to find something consistent with what the township has already either approved through ordinance or bargained through the collective bargaining process with one of your bargaining units.
and the 5 years came from Philadelphia.
5 years came, that's what, as I understand it, the city of Philadelphia does, at least for some categories of employees. You have to live inside the city for the first 5 years of your employment before you have the option of moving outside of the city. But there's no magic, again, to that either. As you know, initially, you were provided with several versions of ordinances for your consideration, I think for the purpose of trying to narrow the discussion and the focus. When I spoke with Mr. Polari, we decided we'd put this one in since, based on the feedback we had gotten from all of you, this seemed to be the one that had, at least some general consensus to it. Certainly not unanimous, far from it, but.
Yeah, could I ask a follow-up question? My question would be, if we made it 12 miles, which say we didn't make it yet, but say we make it 12 miles the way it's written, can it arbitrarily be changed for, like, say, if you said to somebody, well, you actually drive the plow truck, so you can only be 5 miles, or you can only be 3 miles. It's 12 miles, period,
No,
for
you can't
anybody,
do
no
that.
matter what job they do.
As proposed in this ordinance, that would be the case. Now, again, public works employees, police are subject to collective bargaining agreements that already set forth, separate and apart from the township's residency ordinances, what their residency requirements are. Their residency requirements in most cases trump what the township allows, because the township doesn't allow for employees to live outside of the township. So if you are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, if you are not covered by a bargaining unit, you have to live in the township. If you're a director, you have to live in the township. If you're a non-uniform, non-bargaining unit employee, you have to live in the township, unless, of course, you're grandfathered, as we talked about, people prior to the ordinance going into place.
Okay, so the public works employees
Yes,
who are in a union, right?
yes.
Do they have now an outside residency that they're allowed to meet?
No.
No, right?
New hires, no, but grandfathered employees that were hired before a certain date, yes.
They do.
But you said that this goes upon collective bargaining for the road department, for Public
Correct.
Works. Then why are we even doing this? They can do that
That's what I'm saying. If we
in their own
say-
contract when they do their contract.
If we say it's 12 miles, and then during collective bargaining, they win an arbitration agreement that says it can be 15 miles, and overrides our 12, I was under the understanding that they can't live out of the township now, no matter when they were employed.
That's the current township policy.
Okay, well
correct.
then- That's not what you just said.
That's not correct. There are grandfathered employees.
Besides the grandfathered employees.
You hired today, you have to live in the township.
And
You
the
were hired
grandfathered ones are the
yesterday, you
same
have to
date
live
as
in the township.
1994? Are the grandfathered ones the same date as 1994? Or different grandfather?
I think they're generally all around that same time.
But you're saying the Public Works would, through collective bargaining, have this done, correct? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not the township's labor attorney, so I don't want to give you that opinion, but I can tell you that the police have it in their contract.
Okay, and you said Public Works when you said police and Public Works. That's why I'm
I
questioning.
did, but again, I was answering the question, where did the distance come from? And the distance comes from the fact that the Public Works contract has in it for the grandfathered employees, I apologize if I didn't make that clear. For the grandfathered employees, they are permitted to live within 30 minutes of the township.
Because we have department heads, we have people who work in this building, I guess, and then we have Public Works. They're the main, we're not including the police, that's who we're talking about, right?
Everybody but the police.
Yeah, everybody but the police, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you explain this paragraph to me, Joe? I don't know why I don't understand it.
I don't know, I haven't been doing a good job so far, but I'll try.
I'm having difficulty too. All right, on the one amendments, A, small d, it says, within 6 months of the date that his or her appointment has been confirmed by the Township Council, the director of each department shall become a bona fide resident and domiciliary of Bensalem Township and shall continue to reside and be domiciled within Bensalem Township for his or her duration of service in the position of the department. If we're changing that, how does that, is that saying they have to be residents here? And aren't we changing that?
In this particular
It's before the 5
version,
years, I think.
this particular version of the proposed ordinance, again, one of several that we provided to you. In this case, this language continues to mirror the current policy of the township. That
Right.
being that within 6 months of their hire, the township directors have to be bona fide residents and domiciliaries of the township. You have to be a legal resident, and you have to, in fact, live in the township within 6 months of being hired. So this ordinance would not change that requirement from today for department heads. What is in place currently for department heads as a residency requirement would continue if council were to adopt this form of ordinance in its current form tonight. Or you can't do it tonight,
So
obviously.
one of the versions, and it could be this one, I didn't read the whole thing over again, but, so they would have to establish residency within 6 months, but then after 5 years, they would have the option of moving out of town.
No, under
No,
this,
not department heads
Not
would
department
always
heads.
have to remain, as long as they're a department head, they would have to remain a
Ver-
resident of Bensalem
That was,
Township.
Okay, that's what I read. That's
that
why I
was
wanted to make sure I
version.
read that right.
So is this was version what, 3?
3,
We had 1,
yeah.
2, and 3.
this was version 3.
Oh, this is version 3, okay.
All right.
So the versions that you were provided, one would have allowed for department heads and employees to reside outside of the township. One would have done away with the residency requirement altogether, and then this one, which
Then-
is,
And then there was one that specified that we would be able to, as a majority of council, waive that if it was presented to us.
For a department head, yes.
Yeah, for department heads.
That's this version, it says that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So we could waive that if we needed to hire somebody we couldn't find, we felt that a legitimate effort was made to find somebody that we couldn't get a
Correct.
residence for.
How does it feel? Seriously. I know.
I have one other quick question. Mr. Pazzo, when you're ready.
sure.
Just to clarify and confirm, so if we pass this resolution tonight,
We're not, it's
not
not up
voting.
for, it's not
It
up
has
for
to
a vote
be-
tonight. It's
Has to be
discussion.
advertised.
so if it gets passed at some point in the future, well, then what agreement would supersede? So, for example, if the collective bargaining agreement had stated differing terms than what this states, which one would supersede which?
Collective bargaining.
Well, I'm just
I
saying if-
believe that all of the township employees would then fall, to the extent that their agreements don't contradict
Okay.
the ordinance, that they would fall under the ordinance.
So the
Unless and
only,
until something else were negotiated. Again, I'm not the township's labor counsel, so take that advice with a grain of salt. He may opine differently, but that's my belief and understanding.
Okay, thank
so
you.
I just want to make sure that I understand. So you're saying if a collective bargaining agreement has a different residency requirement, it would trump this ordinance, correct?
That should be correct.
That's what I hear.
The only
I
one that
believe
has
so.
it is police, so
But
police are the only
but
ones
if
that-
tomorrow, all the collective bargaining agreements require, except for police, require new hires to live in the township, if the township policy now were such that new hires could live outside of the township, I don't know if that would require some action between the township and the bargaining unit to make
Sort
their
that out.
agreement
Okay.
reflect the new condition. But certainly, I can think of no reason why the township wouldn't make it applicable.
Okay.
But what the process is, whether it would sua sponte become that way, or whether it would require some affirmative action, some affirmative negotiation between the township and the bargaining units, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I want to give my opinion on this, and my opinion is that if you work for the township, you're paid by taxpayers' money, you should be working, living and working in the township. If, just using Public Works, for instance, if they move 12 miles away and a snowstorm hits without our knowledge, or a storm causes problems, and everybody lives 12 miles away and nobody can get in, then the residents of Bensalem suffer with no services. Emergency equipment can't get to where they need to get to take care of things and to keep the residents of Bensalem safe. I think one of the things that if you're going to work for the township, I believe that you should live in the township. I just believe that that's fair to the taxpayers of Bensalem, and that's my opinion.
And I think it's a valid opinion. I guess I would counter that with, for starters, the police officers are already permitted to live within 12 miles of the township, and they are forced to respond to emergency calls. I would think the same requirement would go for Public Works. If they can't come in to service the roads in a storm, then they're not doing their job, and they probably shouldn't be employed in that position.
Bensalem Police always have a shift on, so that shift would remain on while the other people that couldn't get in would be there. So you'd always have some kind of protection. Volunteer firemen have to drive to their fire stations from their homes because they don't live at the station. Public Works lives in Bensalem, they can get to the township building to get their plows and get there and do it. Now,
Yeah, but I don't believe that these storms happen in a bubble. I mean, there is definitely some warning and forecasting, and there's got to be some foresight, from the department head and how to manage that group of how we're going to handle that.
Again, it's my opinion, and you have your opinion,
that's
and
fine.
that's what the opinions are for. So you guys can make a decision as to if this ordinance suits what you're what you want to see, we can have this put into formal ordinance and have it at our next meeting to vote on it. If there's any changes you'd like to make to it, bring those up now so we can get those to the solicitor and he can have this put together for the next meeting.
Well, if they, this is the Public Works, okay, so of course, I'm still a little confused about this bargaining agreement with Public Works.
They don't have a bargaining agreement, only the police.
So, okay. So
Nobody else has a bargaining agreement except the police. and
No,
that's
no,
federal.
no, no, the Public Works does have a contract, a bargaining agreement with the
Then
township.
why aren't they bargaining it in their agreement like the
Well,
police do?
that's my
Go into
question.
arbitration. Why are we doing
This
this?
will address it for all township employees, aside from the police, which already have an agreement that covers something like
Yeah, the
this.
point is-
And they wouldn't need it in their collective bargaining agreement if we had this in the code already. So this
Yeah, but what, so, yeah, but if the,
This addresses it that every township employee is treated the same. That if it's good enough for one union, it's good enough for all the employees. That's what this does. This consolidates it,
Yeah,
it
but
makes
you're
it
saying-
fair and equitable
Okay.
for any employee of the
but
township.
you're saying it's not good for department heads because why?
I believe that department heads are paid a very high salary to run this township on a daily basis, and therefore, there should be requirements for them to reside within the township. Just like there are requirements for those of us sitting up here that are elected
So
officials, that
everybody
we
should be
have to
treated
be
the same
elected.
unless you make more money, is that what you're saying? Everybody should be the same unless, in
I-
your opinion, they make too much money.
No, I think that
Have to
it's
move
the
the Bensalem.
day-to-day job of actually running, from a management perspective, of running this township, running each of the departments. That is what concerns me, that I want them here
But if
residing in the
Yeah, but if
township.
the finance director doesn't get to work because of a storm, that's not as important as the.
I'm not
plow-
talking about a storm.
Doesn't matter whether the plow guy's getting paid more than the finance director. If one can't make it to work, they can't make it to work.
That, I believe township,
But the other
the
problem
director
was
should
with
have to
what-
reside
Yeah,
here.
but the other problem with the directors, at least it's from an administrative point of view, from what I heard, is that they're having trouble getting someone with the expertise and resume to hire department heads that live within the township.
And this gives us a chance that we can waive that. This version gives us a
If-
chance that if that's
if-
the situation and we run out of all other options, the mayor can recommend to us, and we can waive that requirement on a
Just for-
case-by-case basis.
Okay, but it's not fair. You made a statement that the reason we're doing this because you didn't think it was right that Public Works has to negotiate in their contract. They should be treated like everybody else, except
Except those that have more
Department heads.
responsibility, the department heads.
Okay.
They should be treated differently? Is that what you're saying? I
Sure.
mean, you are aware that there are townships, even in Bucks County, where there are township manager, different form of government. The
Mhm.
township manager, who's similar to what a mayor would be, executive, does not live in the township.
I understand that.
Okay, well, I didn't know you would know that.
Just to add something, the Northampton's police chief lives in Bensalem,
I think Bristol Township's manager is,
and their manager lives in Bensalem.
but, I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
I'm just.
That's just my opinion. I mean, we're entitled to disagree on it.
If someone,
And I believe this gives us a case-by-case scenario where we can waive that requirement if necessary.
so, if, in my opinion, if we were to negotiate this out in the better, for lack of a better word, if they're required to be here for 5 years, then at least we know that they're established residents who are being hired. And then after 5 years, if their personal situation should change. Because to me, if you own a house in Bensalem and for instance, you get in a relationship with someone that lives in Middletown Township and they own a house already and they have kids, and you want to move there to get married or be a couple and you have kids, it doesn't matter how much you make in Bensalem, whether you have to move or not.
I apologize for the comment I made about salary, if that's what's
Okay.
your sticking point.
Well, it is-
I'll retract that statement.
So, to me, that's not the point, but if they have to be here 5 years, at least we'll know that we have somebody committed to being here 5 years, and then after 5 years, they would earn the right to choose to be outside the township within 12 months.
Okay, I'm gonna
I'd be willing to go for that.
I'm going to make this comment in a different way. It is our job on this board to look after the safety, health, and welfare of the people of this township. And I think that's what people living in the township, working in the township, does for this township. They're available anytime there's an emergency or something needs to be done. It's our job to do that. Somebody moves to Warrington, it can take an hour to get from Warrington here on a good day. I mean, to me, it's the most important thing is looking after the safety, welfare of the residents, and that's why I believe that it should stay. You want to work here, you live here. It's our taxpayer money paying for it. Their earned income tax is going to go to another township, so that the residents of Bensalem are on the hook for all when they move out. To me, that's just not fair. None of the people that work here had a problem with the residency requirement when they got their job, because it got them a better chance at that job. But after time, we have a problem with it. If you don't want to work in Bensalem or live in Bensalem, then don't work in Bensalem. That's just my opinion.
Sure. I
So
understand.
it's the safety of the residents of Bensalem is my first
And
concern.
I've been hearing an argument, because I had a union guy call me, I returned his call, but he didn't call me back. But that, because they make less, they can't afford to live here, but they're moving to other areas that are the same price,
Or worse.
you know, the same, it's not, unless you move out of Bucks County, you can't move to Feasterville or Warminster or Langhorne or Middletown Township and buy a lower priced house with lower taxes and lower living costs. You would have to move into Northeast Philadelphia. That would be the closest thing you could do to lower your, and then in the future, we might end up, you know, to me, we have a lot of residents, but that's the point. If you have 60,000 people, we've always had public works people who wanted a job to take that job. But the department heads are hard because I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I can't take that job, you know, and other people who have those qualifications have good jobs. You know what I mean? They're all good jobs, so that's the problem, finding somebody, but I don't know, I'm not the mayor. So you have to tell them, is it hard to find people, or?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Talking to me? You talking to me?
Is it hard to find somebody to be, you've been trying to find somebody to replace Matt Tequita, so.
I believe what this one does is give them the ability to go out and find somebody who can do the job and say to council, I'd like you to waive this and let me have it.
Yeah.
It's just, if every department head makes $150,000 a year, they work here, they don't live here, they live somewhere else. Again, their earned income tax goes to the town they live in, not to us. Our taxpayers, again, are paying for these people to work here. I don't believe that
Well, I
that is.
understand that, I understand it, but I think that
In order to run for office, you have to live here. In order to be the mayor, you have to live here. You know what I mean? In order to do this thing, I
In
think.
order to have that level of responsibility, you have to live here.
But don't people in public works make enough to live here? Is that what you're arguing? That they don't make enough
That's
to-
not what I'm saying. I'm
Why not?
I'm talking about the responsibility of managing this township
Okay.
on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so what changes do we want to see? Let's get them in, let's get moving. We have a big agenda here, so.
I'm comfortable with this as presented.
I'm not particularly fond of all of it, but I think the mileage should be a lot less than 12 miles.
I can see good points on both sides, but I'm fairly okay with this. I mean, I think we could take this under consideration, but we're not voting tonight, so I don't want to.
No, but it's got to be
No, but we have to
changed.
advertise it and,
Yeah, but we don't need to change it tonight.
Yeah,
When do we
we're
have to
going to tell them
advertise?
so that they can put it in and advertise it.
Mr.
So-
Advisor, when do you need to know before it's advertised?
no, let's do it tonight
Well, then,
while we're on the
Well,
record.
it's voting.
Just about.
What I would anticipate would happen this evening, if there are a majority of you who are in support of the ordinance as presented, then you can authorize the administration to advertise the ordinance in its current form. If there are those among you who believe that the idea of changing the residency requirements at all are not something you want to do, then you can just advise us at this time that there's nothing to be advertised, that you don't wish to move forward. If you want something substantially different than this, you can tell us tonight.
It's a version without reading this 4-page thing and memorizing it. People can wait, I can read pretty fast, but I want to clarify that this version here is the version that we're going to advertise. Okay, so this one says that Public Works can move out after 5 years within 12 miles. Our department heads cannot, but we could vote if it was determined, we could waive that requirement if it was determined that one of the department heads.
Not that
Is
they
that in
move
here?
them out. Not that they move them out, you can
We would just waive the,
You can't find somebody, you can waive the requirements for them to live here, but it doesn't.
Oh, they can't move out.
No, no,
But they can
the way,
well, the
Wait.
whole residency requirement could be waived. So
Exactly.
it would no
So-
longer apply to them, so they could in fact move out of that.
so if you had a department head
They would have to,
who wanted,
Move out
who,
from the township, they could.
he's saying they have to be out to begin with. Joe, what's the difference?
you, the language that we've used here is intentionally drafted so that if at any point in time, the director, whether it's a prospective hire or a current employee, wishes to have that residency requirement removed or waived for him or her, then a petition would be made to the council by the mayor to have that requirement waived for that particular director.
I have to ask, how can that be legal to have two employees of the same township, and just because they have different positions, someone has a special exception that they can apply not to live in the township, and the person who is not a director cannot? Although in 5 years they can, I mean, that's a different thing, but within
not
that 5-year
directors.
period.
Right, that's a good question. I mean, are we doing something, would we potentially be doing something not legal by making a
Unconstitutional.
requirement that's not,
Well, he said the
Equal
5-year
for
thing's
all.
not in this one though, right?
well, it's in there for the remaining township employees.
It's saying that the department heads can come and ask to have it waived so they can move out.
My answer, and I will try and say this as tactfully as I can, we certainly wouldn't put an ordinance in front of you that we did not believe to be legal, enforceable, and the like on its face.
We hope.
If you'd like for me to discuss with you the potential pitfalls of adopting this ordinance in the future, I'd be happy to do so, but I'd prefer to do that in executive session, as I generally don't like to advertise over the television how people could potentially sue the township.
Joe.
Thank you.
Not necessarily successfully, but nonetheless, how they might
Joe,
proceed with the claim.
If at our next meeting, we advertise this ordinance right here, right? Because I think I got the wrong answer before, but I could be wrong. Okay, so if we did this ordinance right here, the department heads would have to live here unless they got an exception approved by the majority of council.
Correct.
The other employees who aren't, besides the police, would have to live here for at least 5 years. And after their 5-year employment, they would have a choice of moving within 12 miles of the township. That's what this says.
Yes, but not exactly the way you're saying it, Mr. Knowles, because this would apply to future hires and current hires. So the way we've worded it, and the way I believe it would read, is such that if the day that this ordinance goes into effect, if you've been a township employee for over 5 years, then you could move out of the
Okay,
township.
that's what I meant. You earned
But
5.
if you're someone who's hired the day after this was put into law, then it would take you 5 years to
Right,
achieve
and
that
if you work here 2
status.
years, you would have to be here 3 more years.
That's correct. I'll accept your
You
math.
said you weren't good at math now.
If you were here 1 year, you would have to be here 4 more years.
Again, I'll accept your math.
So I just want to make sure. Okay, well, as a compromise, since I'm a compromise kind of guy, I'd be okay with this, if we advertise this, that's my opinion.
Where's your compromise?
Well, compared to 2 and 22.
Let me ask you a question. Can they
I'm okay
change
with
something
it.
small?
I'm okay with this version as presented.
I share the same sentiments.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. It makes sense. It makes it consistent with our police department.
It doesn't, police is
It sets an ordinance across all of our employees.
Okay, so he's okay with advertising.
There you go.
Mr. Paizo, you have your
I believe I have my direction. We'll advertise the ordinance as presented.
The only reason it's consistent with the police department, because they out-trumped us, because they have the bargaining agreement. Because initially, we wanted this to be for everyone who was an employee of the township.
including police.
Right, but
But, so, well, I'm just saying, that's so, for the sake of being, I certainly agree that we should be as consistent as possible, but I have to agree with Councilman Polari that 12 miles may be a little bit much when it comes to employees.
Now, Joe, we advertised 12 miles. Can we change that part of it or not?
You have the ability as a governing body to make minor revisions to an ordinance after it's been advertised. Going from 12 to 15,
Or 12 to 10?
I would say would be an okay change that night because you're making it more expansive, not more restrictive. If you were going from 12 to 10 that evening, I'd be a little less confident in your ability to do that without re-advertising because you're making it more restrictive rather than
But each
broadening.
council member has the right to vote no when it comes up if they don't agree with it.
If absolutely,
I'm fine with
absolutely.
being advertised.
This hasn't been advertised, though, right?
This has not been
So if
advertised.
we said tonight we want to make it 8 miles, we can say 8 miles.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said, well, we need to discuss it. That's what I'm asking. Do we need to discuss it now
Well, I
or should we
understand,
discuss
we
it?
are doing it. That's what we're doing. Well, that's what we're doing for half an hour.
Okay.
The language of the, and I apologize, I had left them in the back before, so that's why I was vamping a little bit. The language from the fire collective bargaining agreement, everyone has to live in the township. From the office, the grandfathering period, for anyone who falls within the grandfathering period, is 6 miles. Public Works, anyone who falls within that grandfathering period is 30 minutes travel time. And the police, if you're grandfathered, it's 15 miles. If you're a new hire, it's 12 miles. So of the mileage distances that were ever in effect under any of the agreements, it would have been 6 miles, 30 minutes, and 15 miles.
All right, I suggest we
And
go-
today it's
I
12.
suggest we go with 6 miles. That's my suggestion.
I'd prefer to keep it 12 miles to be consistent with new hires in the police department. Because this would apply to new hires from the rest of the township. Understood.
So why are we comparing
No,
it to
not just-
something that went through collective bargaining?
No, but it's,
Because again, I go back to if we had this on the books, the police would not need that collective bargaining
No, but it- no,
agreement,
but it-
or that aspect of
this
their.
is going to be retroactive for current employees for Public Works.
Understood.
So they'll get,
What was 6 miles? 6 miles now?
6 miles was at one time.
6 miles was at one time for office workers. Those members, I believe it's down in building and planning, are members of a bargaining unit.
Because, I mean, I can see both sides of the argument that they should live in a township because it's their community and such. But by the same token, a police officer living out of the community, out of the township makes sense because when they arrest their neighbor, it's kind of tough to go to school with their kids and things like that. It's a whole different thing, and jeopardy of their life could be relative to making an arrest or something like that, too. A police officer is completely different than someone who's...
I understand that. It might be a little bit of a stretch because you could almost make the argument of no police should live in the township, and I don't want to go that far. I don't want to insinuate that
We
that's
just need to decide how many miles, right?
right.
Yeah.
I say we leave it as presented,
Leave it at
12 miles.
And the mayor reminded me that the 12 miles in the current police contract, which has now been in there for several contracts, came out of an arbitration decision.
Okay, so I'm fine with 12 miles, but it's up to you guys.
Okay, Joe, you have the changes?
No changes for this version as presented.
3 nods on that?
Yes.
We're a little cow.
Three noggins.
We're not voting, so I guess what I'm saying is...
We'll advertise as presented, and then you'll have the opportunity to vote on it at your next, or at whatever meeting it's advertised for. I assume will be
Can
the next
we
meeting.
advertise it in time for the next council meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Debbie will take care of getting it advertised.
Thank you, Debbie.
Everything here will be on our next agenda. Okay, thanks everybody for your patience. Number 9 on the agenda is a consideration of a land development extension agreement for Somerton Valley Homes LP, Carter Road and Somerton Road, Trevose, PA, tax parcel 2-6-1 and 2-7-2.
As will occur from time to time, for land development projects that have been approved and are underway, the developer will come to the township and ask for an extension of its land development improvements agreement where that agreement is due to expire and the project has not yet been completed. This is one such example of those instances. In this case, the developer is Somerton Valley Homes LP for the Somerton Valley Homes project in the Trevose section of the township. They are asking for an extension of the agreement out to a date of January 11, 2020. If council is of a mind to grant that request, the administration recommends that such approval be conditioned upon an audit of the escrow funds currently being held by the township by both the finance department and the township engineer to assure that sufficient funds remain in escrow for the completion of the project at such time as the agreement expires.
So based off the audit that will be required, would it be appropriate then to vote on some of the releasing of the escrow items that's on the agenda later on?
This is separate from that?
It's separate, but it seems to be related. I mean, this is for Somerton Valley Homes Phase 2, and we've got an escrow release on the agenda tonight, item 16, for Somerton Valley Homes Phase 2.
All three phases.
Right, but specifically, this land development extension appears to apply, and please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but on the last page of this, it says Phase 2. So would this apply to just Phase 2 or to all phases of the project?
Well, my thing, unless it's incorrect, 15 says it's for Phase 3 release, and 16 says for Phase 2, but it's a zero amount. I don't know what that means.
Joe, is it my understanding that this is on phase that's almost completed? And so this would be on phase 2 that's almost completed. Phase 3, we already have an agreement on that goes forward beyond this?
The township engineer could certainly speak on this far more intelligently than I could, and so I'll afford him that opportunity.
Ron?
Yes, I think for Phase 2, this date is sufficient. We'll research the file and see if there is another one on file for Phase 3 already. But we can bring that back to you at the next meeting.
Phase 2 is almost complete,
Yeah.
correct?
So we wouldn't need an extension then?
I would suggest you'll see on the release, we're releasing zero because they're slow in some of the things that we need to have done.
But, and I hate to jump agenda items, but the only things that are done are permanent rake, seed, and mulch, and respread topsoil. And that's roughly $1,000 worth of work plus contingency. So why are we granting a one-year extension from January to the following January?
Like they can't get done, well, it's September now.
They could
Well,
get it
we-
done
they
before
could-
the end of,
if
before the
they-
winter season hits.
They could, but their history is not for swift action. And I prefer to have a little more time to hold them to their agreements. If you want to shorten this, that's your prerogative.
I guess my bigger issue is, the way this is worded, it says, upon consideration of the mutual promises contained in this agreement. There are no mutual promises. All we're doing is granting them a one-year extension. I don't understand what the benefit to the township is, when all that has to be done is some topsoil, seeding, and mulching.
The benefit is it gives us the opportunity to check the escrows that we have on record to make sure they're up to date with the changes in costs to do work. In other words, when we made the developers agreement, that may have been 4 years ago. The cost to put in a foot of curbing or whatever costs more today. So as Mr. Pizzo stated, the finance department and we have to check our agreements.
So you're saying that the other escrow releases have not yet been audited?
They're audited. we audit them all the time to make sure there's sufficient funds in the escrow.
I guess I'm confused of if all that needs to be done is $1,000 worth of work of seeding, mulching, and topsoiling. Why do we
What
need
I'm going to
to?
do is, Quentin, I'm going to introduce Quentin Neron. He's been our engineering inspector for 25 years. He's involved intimately with this project and many others in the township. On phases 1 and 2, what all are remaining?
Hold on one second, Ron. Quentin, please come up to the
Oh, I'm sorry.
microphone, please. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Quentin Neron. I'm the engineering inspector for Bensalem Township with O'Donnell Nacarado. So basically, to explain what's going on with this, there's 3 different phases on the project. There's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Each one has a separate letter of credit and an agreement with the township. So phase 2's expiration might be different date than phase 3. I don't know when phase 3's extension is because it's handled internally from the township and not our office. So phase 3 might have an expiration of June 2nd, we'll say, of whatever year. Phase 2 might be January 3rd, October 2nd. It varies whenever they put that into construction. Regarding phase 2, we have more additional work than what was requested. We have paving that's in phase 2 that was actually pushed in phase 3's letter of credit. There's concrete work, miscellaneous landscaping, grading, seeding. There's a lot of miscellaneous punch list items as well.
So was the scope of that work moved from phase 2 to phase 3? Is that what you're saying?
Some of the overall scope, yes, because what ended up happening is when phase 2 started, we put all the paving was put into that phase. When phase 3 started, we released some monies from phase 2 to go into the letter credit of phase 3, which would include paving of the wearing course, which is the finished coat of the actual base of the roadway.
So can phase 2 be marked complete without those areas completed, those paving
Well,
works?
typically what we do is we want the wearing course to be done at the end of the project, so there's no heavy construction traffic going through.
I understand.
We still have, I believe there's 8 units left. There's still 2 building groups left that need to be constructed, which they're anticipating on being completed by December. They've not yet started yet, so I'm not sure if that's going to hold true.
Okay, I guess that doesn't really address any of my concerns with this particular agreement for phase 2.
Well, phase 2, it gives them the extension to get the work done in phase 2. We still consider the roadway as part of phase 2, as well as other miscellaneous items. So by giving them the extension, they might not need the full year. I know their game plan is to get paved before November.
But they're getting paid through phase 3 for that work.
Right, that's where the money is in hold for the actual wearing course. But we still consider the limits of the boundaries of lots, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3.
Okay, so
Even
geographically, it's within the phase 3
Right.
area. So this
Exactly.
extension would allow that to be done in line with phase 3. So I guess I've got another question now.
Mm-hmm.
Was this ever envisioned to be complete, phase 1 done, phase 2 done, phase 3 done? Or was it always going to be phase 1 is mostly done, phase 2 is mostly done, and then when phase 3 is completed, then we'll actually finish the whole project?
Originally, the developer, I think, wanted to split everything up. We informed them years ago that we could not dedicate phase 1 and be done with phase 1, and then you start phase 2. Because when we go for liquid fuels for each roadway, when the road is dedicated, the road must be completed. So we kind of informed them at that time, we'll let you complete phase 1, complete phase 2, but we're going to keep the wearing course out of the area so no trucks. So phase 2 is probably 70% complete. We have one area of Master Avenue that needs to get done. The second half of Master Avenue, where the residential units are completed and mostly I think are occupied, that is completed in that area.
So it sounds like the township's idea of how this work had to proceed in order to get the full dedication of the roads and all of that
Correct. We're
work
going to get that all at one shot.
That's different than what the developer had in mind.
Correct.
Is there any way that we can correct that on a forward basis so that we don't run into this issue with future developers? I think we've got some kind of similar situation going on at Waterside that we've talked about before. There's talks about future developments with the Catherine Drexel property, the Armstrong property. So my question is, if we have any kind of phased construction approach, if we have any kind of phased construction approach, is the township's position such that it can't be completed, that this phased approach isn't going to work properly the way that this was done, and we need to do something internally to correct that?
Well, you can look at it different ways on different projects. In this project, there's really only 2 ways in and out. And the first phase consists of phase 1 and 2, but the roads are on both. So we would not be able to dedicate those roads in a portion to satisfy the Pennsylvania state regulations, to get liquid fuels money, which we do for any dedicated street.
Right, and that's what I'm
So-
saying. So clearly there was an issue with how this project was structured.
Right.
Is there an issue with other projects of how they're structured? And
Not
is there something we can
now.
do going forward so that other projects don't get structured this way?
One way
Well,
you
we
can,
can answer Mr. Sloan, yes. With each project that comes in, we'll be aware of the situation. This was 1, 2, 3, that's the way it was planned, but
Yeah.
it moved so quickly that it didn't work out that way. But certainly when new developments come in, we'll look
Okay.
at that problem and make sure it doesn't
Okay,
arise again.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Are
Mr.
you
Knowles?
done? Okay, my question would be, is there any disadvantage for the township extending this till next January, or should we make it a sooner date? Is it better for the township to make the extension for, say, the end of June as opposed to next January?
it wouldn't make a difference, because if they do get the work done, then it won't be coming in. For some reason, if June 1st came in and that was the extension deadline, then if they were, for some reason, were held up for whatever reason and had to finish in July, they would have to come in again for another extension for that 3-month period, just to satisfy that need. So, and if anything, it's better to have it longer than what's anticipated, just in case something does arise.
One other point to that question, Mr. Knowles, is that the developer is still building and selling houses, correct?
Correct.
So the reason that the township would not want to have the agreements terminate now, before the houses are built and sold, would then shift the onus, at least to some extent, to the township to now complete these improvements. In most cases, the builder is going to finish the houses, then finish the final aspects of the improvements, the final raking and seeding and grading, the wearing course on the roads, things of that nature. So to try and jump the gun on the builder when the builder is certainly marketing the houses. The housing market is what it is, and the houses will sell as they sell. More often than that, that's why we get these requests. It's not that the developer has moved off-site and the development is sitting there unfinished. The developer is still out there swinging hammers and building homes. The parts of the development that the developer's agreement are meant to secure, some of which you don't do until the last house is occupied and it's the final making everything nice, if you will, for the
But this
development.
situation has nothing to do with what we're doing at Mother Catherine Drexel's property, right? That's a different thing. That has nothing to do with it.
I'm not even aware of it.
Correct. At this point, there's no, we have no development agreement for Mother Catherine Drexel. You know, so in the case of the Phase 3 in the case of the Phase 3 request, that's where houses are still being built. That's where where the activity's happening. That's where you're seeing the request for a significant release. In the case of the other 2 phases, which are largely done, but as Quentin said, there are still things that
Miscellaneous punch list work and
mesh between the 3 phases. The township is basically sitting on the 10% contingency. Developer's asking for that, and we're saying no, not until everything's done.
Because we push things
So-
like the paving and the curbing down into the scope of phase 3.
So is
Correct.
there any disadvantage to the township extending this agreement to January 11, 2001? So there's no disadvantage?
no,
So
not
all
the
this
township at all.
Is there any disadvantage to the residents? I mean, has anybody bought the houses that were constructed in phase 2 yet?
They're all,
Are they
they're pretty much-
living there yet, I
if
should say?
They're pretty much, if
occupied.
they're not fully occupied in phase 2, I would think they're 90%.
So we have residents then that aren't getting all this finishing work done? And we're
Not in
getting-
phase 2. In phase 2, we are paved except for the exit drive coming out. of-
No, I'm talking about things like, again, in my mind, I see this as applying to what's listed on this escrow release of seeding, mulching, topsoil, that kind of
Okay.
work.
So in phase 2, there's an area of the overhead pico wires that some excavated soil was used for fill and some topsoil. We have erosion on that, so we have to go in there, remove any excess soil we have, fine gradient seed it, and stabilize current regs.
And that's just where the
That's in
lines are?
phase 2. So that's one of the reasons why we're holding money
Got
for
it, okay.
vacancy.
Okay.
There might be some touch-up work here and there where some ground might settle between the right-of-way, between which is the grass strip and the curbing and the sidewalk. So we have some touch-up work in there. For the most part, every lot stabilized in phase 2.
Okay.
We did walk the job with the county conservation district about a week and a half ago. We're going to have them do some weed and feed because there's a lot of crabgrass, so we need to have that for full stabilization. So we're working on that, trying to get all that done this fall.
Okay.
So they'll probably be coming back in end of the November, maybe, to release some of that gradient seeding work.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions on this extension agreement? If not, the motion would be in order.
Based on the explanation given that this is needed because the paving work has been moved into the phase 3, I'm going to make a motion that we approve as presented.
Do we have a second? Any question on the motion? Thank you, Quentin. All in favor?
Thank you. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 10 on the agenda, consideration of a lot line consolidation. Applicant Ivy State Road Properties LLC, site 3750 State Road, warehouse building, zoning classification is general industrial, tax parcel 2-2-79-9-4, 79-9-5, 79-9-6, 7910, and 2-80-28. Mr. Maloney?
Good evening, Mr. Polari. First of
Mr.
all,
Maloney.
I'm pleased to advise that this
me
project
one
involves
second.
a single phase, and we will not have multiple phases to go through.
Okay.
But-
Mr. Pizzo?
The only thing I was going to suggest, Mr. Polari, is item 10, I believe, is directly affected by item 11, which is the land development application for the same property or properties that are being considered for the lot line consolidation. So council may want to, on the record, deal with both items as part of a single hearing. The applicant may not wish to move forward with item 10 if item 11 doesn't pass.
Yeah, we agree
So-
that they should be consolidated.
So that you probably deal with 10 and 11 together as a single hearing.
Yeah,
You're okay?
our review is both together.
Okay. So you're prepared for that, Mr. Maloney, to handle it that way?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
for a single hearing for both items 10 and 11. Yes, very briefly, I've provided proof of notice to Mr. Pizzo. This was originally noticed for the meeting of July 23rd. It was continued from that date. The continuance was announced at the meeting, and I provided Mr. Pizzo with our proof of service on adjoining property owners for the July 23rd meeting. This project involves the redevelopment of the Charming Shops property near Winks Lane and State Road. You know, Charming Shops has been vacant for several years now. This proposal provides for, or proposes to redevelop that site with a 235,000 square foot warehouse storage facility. It will include, I think, 43 different loading docks, 175 parking stalls, associated buffering, stormwater management. We're going to leave the main driveway where it is on State Road. Originally, we had proposed to move it over closer to the 5 residences on State Road. Planning Commission and I believe Mr. Worsta both recommended to leave it where it is, so the plan that you have before you calls for having it approximately at the midsection of the State Road frontage. We have a secondary access off of Winks Lane for our employees and, if necessary, for trucks, but we don't think that that'll be necessary given the State Road entrance. And we have a third emergency entrance off of Haunted Lane. That's already existing. So that's not going to change. We have gone through fairly extensive reviews, I think, with the township planning folks, with your engineer, your traffic engineer, and I think we have very clean review letters. And I'd be happy to go over them. I also have present Mr. Chris Reese, where is he? Right there. And he has the plans in front of you. He has all the plans loaded on his thumb drive. I also have Mark Roth, our traffic engineer. Mr. Roth, if you have any questions regarding the traffic planning for this project. I also have several representatives from Ivy Realty, Drew DeWitt, Miguel Serra, and Brianna Wilson. And just a word of background, Ivy Realty, I think this is their first project in the township. They are a developer of primarily along the East Coast. They have several properties in Philadelphia. They're located in Montvale, New Jersey. They develop office buildings and storage and warehouse facilities. So they're very excited to be a part of the Bensalem community. This site overall is 21.7 acres. And I will say, and I told my client this when I looked at the plan, this is one of the oddest shaped lots I've ever seen. If you look at it, and I don't think that even includes all of the property. The property itself is extremely strangely shaped. And there's a far northern or northwestern part that isn't showing on this plan that I think they refer to as the pizza slice, because it's just sort of cut off from the rest of the property, and that's going to remain vacant. That's heavily wooded, and it's not proposed for development. Looking through Mr. Gann's review letter, and the latest plan revision that you should have in front of you is dated September 4th. As I say, it's gone through a few revisions in reviewing this with your staff. Items A and B, and I'm referring to Mr. Gann's review letter of September 12th. Items A and B are simply discussion items. Item C, dealing with zoning issues. I have notes that there are no zoning issues to discuss. Item D, dealing with land development. There are very few land development issues to discuss. He notes that number one, we are seeking a waiver of sidewalks along State Road and Winks Lane. There are no other sidewalks in the area, and we think that makes sense. We're proposing to pay a fee in lieu of those sidewalks. Number two, simply notes that State Road and Haunted Lane are both state roads, and so any work that we want to do on either of those roads will require a highway occupancy permit from the state. Number three, notes that we're seeking both preliminary and final land development approval tonight, so that's a waiver of the requirement to proceed through both preliminary and final. And number four, we propose to include in the shade tree requirements, we have the correct number of trees. We're asking that you include our ornamental trees and evergreen trees within the shade tree number requirements. Frankly, I asked our engineer about that, and he said we're pretty much maxed out on the trees that we can physically locate on the property. And the evergreen trees we're using, we prefer to use them for buffering, particularly because we are close to some residential properties and we want to maintain an evergreen buffer. So those are the four comments dealing with the subdivision land development ordinance, and we think that they're very minor and commonsensical waivers. Stormwater management, we comply with your ordinance. We're asking for three very minor technical waivers that are primarily due to the fact that we're using plastic pipes rather than reinforced concrete pipes. Those three waivers, I don't believe Mr. Gans has any issue with. And if you'd like, Mr. Reese can explain the need or the locations for those pipes. I can tell you what I know about them. And first is to allow us to use HDPE pipes rather than reinforced concrete pipes. In some locations where there's very low flow, we don't need 18-inch wide diameter pipes, and we're proposing to use 15-inch diameter pipes. And there are a few areas where we don't have 2 feet of cover. I don't think we need 2 feet of cover. And finally, we're proposing, or my engineer, I should say, doesn't think we need 2 feet of cover. I have no idea if we need 2 feet of cover or not. Finally, in the basin, we're proposing a less than 2% slope. As I understand it, that's a best management practice to allow more infiltration into the groundwater from the detention basin. I believe I've correctly summarized those stormwater management.
Mr. Yancey, you in agreement with that?
Yes.
I have a quick question.
Let him finish his,
Okay. So it just, right.
let him finish. Go ahead.
Section F, and that was Section E of Mr. Gann's report. Section F is miscellaneous comments.
Below the waiver.
Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. It is not clear where the outfall from inlet number 28 drains and if there is an end wall structure. I understand that it drains into an existing stormwater pipe and ultimately into the stormwater system that serves the site currently. And Mr. Reese, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
The stormwater pipe.
Sir, state your name.
My name is Chris Rice with Boucher and James. REISS.
Hang on a second. Why don't we get all your witnesses sworn in so that if we have any issues.
I think the only other witness would be Mr. Roth.
If we don't know him, so. Okay.
You both raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Mark with the C or K?
Mr. Rice?
Yeah, my name is with a K, also KRIS. So the pipe that Mr. Yans is referring to, it's located in this pizza slice section that Doug was talking about. It drains, there's an existing stormwater system on the adjacent property just to the north, and there's an existing pipe that drains that location now from our site. So,
I think what we're looking for is a continuation. You make a connection to the inlet 28. We want to know what happens after that connection.
yes,
So that'll have to be documented.
correct, yeah, and we will comply with that.
They'll
We'll provide
comply, the
information.
plan will be revised, or a note will
Right.
be added, whatever, to the satisfaction of the
Correct.
township engineer.
Thank you, Ron. Section F are miscellaneous comments, and 1, 2, and 3 are simply comments that don't require a response. Number 4, notes, asks a question about the proposed location of a split rail fence and shadow box fence, and I understand that the split rail fence is being removed from the plans. There is a proposed shadow box plans to separate our property from the residential properties. So that's the location of the shadow box fence. And again, that's part of the buffering of our use from the residential uses. Number 5 is simply a comment that we got 1 yard dimension slightly off on our zoning data chart, and that will be corrected. And number 6 notes that some of the plan titles on the drawing index aren't in agreement with the actual plan titles. That's a will comply. It's just a drafting matter.
Comply with all those changes.
Comply with all of those. We have a fire marshal's report, and I think we have complied with all the comments that the fire marshal was reviewing our previous plan submission. I believe we have complied with all of those, but if not, we will comply. There is a TPD traffic engineer's report, and other than his comment number 4, which notes that which notes the requirement for sidewalks, we either have complied or we will comply with all of the comments in TPD report. And that's, for the record, that's the report dated July 20, 2018. So they're your ordinance requirements. And typically, my clients are trying to strictly comply with the ordinance and go no further. In this case, I'm pleased to advise that our client wants to be a good citizen of Bensalem, has gone further. After buying the property, and they settled on the property last January, they've been meeting with staff and trying to understand what the township's concerns are. One thing I didn't mention is a traffic impact fee, and that's because under your ordinance and under Act 209, we don't have to pay one because our traffic counts are lower than the previous user's traffic counts. So we don't have to pay any additional traffic impact fee. But we became aware, my client became aware of the township's vision for State Road in that area and concerns about the intersection of Winks Lane and State Road. After meeting with the staff and the mayor, our client decided to, agreed, I won't say decided, but agreed to help the township out with road improvements in that area. Mr. Roth is working with Mr. Worsta in working out improvements to that area, primarily widening State Road, providing for a left turn into our property off of State Road, and providing a left turn lane into Winks Lane as well. And also, I think, as I understand it, some signalization improvements. We're willing, because those plans aren't fully developed, we're willing to contribute $450,000 towards the expected costs. It's my understanding that the expected costs at the outside would be about $550,000 tops. So we're funding a significant majority of the improvements that the township is interested in having undertaken at that location. Mr. Hecker, after discussing it with the client, sent Mr. Pizzo a letter summarizing what we were proposing to do and suggesting that if the council would grant us approval, suggesting language that could be included in the approval letter. And Mr. Pizzo has that specific language. So I think that my client stepped to the plate big time in this case and is really, I think, going above and beyond what's legally required. We also became aware of a neighbor up by this pizza slice that, from what we understand, when Charming Shops was developed, and this was probably between 89 and 91 from what I understand, apparently excess dirt or fill was deposited in that location. And then Charming Shops didn't have any other use for it either because it's so remote, you can't really access it very well from this site. Frankly, it's cut off from our site by a stormwater detention basin. So from what we understand, that depositing of fill up there has caused some drainage problems for at least one neighbor. We're trying to address that as best we can. We met with representatives of the neighbor, and I believe that they're present this evening. And that's the inlet that we were talking about that Mr. Gans had a question about in miscellaneous item number 4. Where was that going to go? Where was that going to drain to? We're going to move. There is an existing inlet structure that apparently is not functioning very well. And we have agreed to move an inlet structure, and it's going to be on our property, to a lower elevation that will better capture the stormwater that's flowing into that area. We're also going to increase the pipe size there. So we're going to take more water out faster than is currently the case. We think that's going to be a significant improvement. The neighbor also expressed to us that apparently people are dumping trash in that area. It's vacant property and it's heavily wooded. We're going to put a 6-foot-high chain link fence. From what was reported to us, they just drive their cars onto it and dump trash. We're going to surround it with a 6-foot-high chain link fence that hopefully will prevent that from happening. So, and again, that's not required by your ordinance. We're just trying to do the right thing and be good neighbors and correct the problem as best we can. So I think in a couple of significant ways, Ivy has gone above and beyond, significantly above and beyond what's required by your ordinance. And frankly, that's a refreshing change from most developers that I think come before you. That's our project in a nutshell. Again, you have Mr. Roth and Mr. Rice here that can answer any questions you have about traffic or about engineering.
I'm going to go to Mr. Diaz first.
Yes. I noted, Mr. Maloney, on Section E of our report, stormwater management, there's several charts for flows from the basins. There's also 2 items below that discussing our concern about utilizing a proposed basin as a temporary sediment basin, and the fact that should too much sediment enter that basin, the basin wouldn't be able to function as designed for final construction. I'm recommending that we meet with your client's engineer and the County Conservation District to come up with a solution to this matter.
And that's a will comply. I understand that we've already scheduled that meeting. I think
That
it's
is scheduled for Wednesday at
for-
10 o'clock.
for Wednesday. So, and that's a will comply. We will follow Conservation District's recommendations with regard to that
Thank you.
issue.
Mr. Pizzo, did you have anything to add before I go to the board?
No, that was my note as well, that we needed to go back to item E2.
Okay, Mr. Knowles, I'll give you the floor first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, a couple questions, and one I have 3 actually, but one, you're willing to pay for sidewalks along State Road. Is curb not included in that because of the type of development, or because they just didn't include curbs?
I believe there is curbing.
There's curbing there,
Yes.
there's sidewalks.
Okay, so
They're waving sidewalks.
just the sidewalks, so it's curbing all along State Road?
Yes.
And then the second question would be, 3A, it says allow pipe materials other than RCP, which is the concrete, and pipe sizes less than 18 inches. Now, you mentioned that you're doing that because you want to go to a 15-inch pipe at spots, but not to be picky, but it says allow pipes other than RCP would mean they could do any pipe besides RCP, right? Is that the? Yeah, but I know, but that's not what the sentence says. It says any pipe, this says allow pipe materials other than RCP.
But I think we should.
So they can make them out of paper if you went by this sentence.
Plastic pipe.
Right, so you need to specify what other pipes are allowed besides RCP. I don't know.
Or you make it to the
To
acceptability of the
the
township engineer, yes.
Okay.
That would protect us there.
Then it says, and pipe size is less than 18 inches, so that means it could be 2 inches, right? Or,
Well, I think, didn't they ask for 15?
well, they're asking for 15, but that's not what it says, that's what I'm saying.
Strengthen that and say required to be 15 inches.
Yeah, less than 18, but no less than 15.
Than 15. And I think that the pipe sizes and material are both specified or shown in the plans, in details in the plans.
And this will all be, it has to be accepted by the township engineer, which if a final motion is made, that would be part of the motion.
Yes.
Anything that's done would be,
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to,
Yep.
not that I don't trust our engineers, but I'd rather have it clear in writing what's allowed and what's not allowed. But also, as far as State Road, I could be wrong, if you're doing this development, doesn't PennDOT tell you what you have to make as far as road improvements? And are you required to make them anyway? So-
It's the few times I've dealt with PennDOT, it's sort of a collaborative process. You go in there and show them what you want to do, and they might tweak it a little bit. Frankly, I think this is going to be such a significant improvement. Tweaking is probably all that they'll do. I think that they'll be very
No,
much
but
in
what if
favor.
PennDOT says, well, we'll allow this change, but you have to put a left turning lane in? Why should we pay for any of that? Why don't you just pay for it?
Because that's an
Not you,
off-site,
the client.
an off-site improvement that, and I don't know what PennDOT would require. You may be right that PennDOT would require a left turn. Yeah.
Joe, I don't know why we're making an agreement.
well, how about before we move on, let's have Mr. Worster come up and explain what was done and what the discussions were and what's happening with that. Because they're, realistically, where the traffic light is, they don't have to do anything for that, but they're stepping up and doing it for safety of
Okay.
the people that work there.
And
And
I don't mean that you're not acting in good faith, but you may be doing way more than you're supposed to do, but I'd like to explain to me why you're doing, how you're doing it.
Well, we like to make sure that they're definitely doing more than we think they should, that they think they should.
Introduce
So-
yourself, please, Mr. Worster.
So, yeah, Phil Worsta, the Township Traffic Engineer, TPD. We've been meeting with these folks for quite some time with regard to State Road and, for that matter, Winks Lane, and even haunted as far as that area of State Road in that part of the township. We have a really good relationship with PennDOT and their highway people and their traffic signal people when it comes to access along this stretch of highway, not only because of this section of road, but because of what we're trying to do on Street Road with 95 and also the rest of State Road down near Waterside all the way down there. So we have an intimate relationship with them. And when this project came up, the issue was that this intersection of Winks Lane and State Road is an off-site intersection. So technically, from a township perspective, all they really have to do is take care of their own access. And the amount of traffic that they're generating is less than what Charming Shops generated. So from a technical perspective, the amount of traffic that they're generating doesn't, quote unquote, warrant a left turn lane by the numbers, which is what PennDOT goes by quite frequently. However, in Bensalem, we don't hold that standard. We hold a higher standard. The Winks Lane and State Road is the only intersection where the main road there's not a left turn lane. And we felt that overall traffic and traffic from this development exacerbates an already poor condition. So we met with PennDOT out there, along with the applicant's engineers, and we met with those folks. And PennDOT agreed with us with regard to the improvement that would happen there. And as Doug said, it is a collaborative effort. But there also is, a legal precedent that could be made with regard to making someone do development that is technically off-site. And I think the developer saw that issue associated with the betterment of this intersection. It's technically off-site, but it's really not. It's right there. But they're not the only ones using the road. I mean, we have tons of truck traffic on Winks Lane and Dunks Ferry and on State Road, so it's not all their problem. But they've stepped up, and I feel that very, very strongly that they came through with a good design that they could probably do much cheaper than the township ever could with private dollars. So their proposal includes a left turn lane, a brand new intersection, a traffic signal there, one of these ones that, it's adaptive and can change based upon traffic volume. They're also fixing the radiuses there as you turn onto Winks Lane. So now trucks that are going over there aren't hitting our traffic signals, and it's going to be a little bit wider to make those moves. So we feel that they are stepping up, and we worked them over pretty good, I think. I mean,
I just wanted to make sure you were fine.
No, I mean, we really did, but we felt we had a compelling case, though. I mean, we didn't want to sell ourselves short with regard to State Road and the community and all that kind of stuff, and we were holding our guns. And instead of me coming up here and saying, turn this thing down, it's terrible for the township, I'm here to say that from a traffic end, I'm very, very happy with that. And I think the community and everybody's going to be happy with what we have in store on State Road.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Roth, did you have anything to add that, I don't want to leave you out there. Okay, thank you. Okay, now that I guess we have all the information, is there any other questions on this?
I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to start with Mr. Pizzo. The proposed offer of the 450, and I want to go back to Mr. Knoll's point. If PennDOT comes in and requires a left-hand turn lane, how would that affect the proposal of the $450,000?
Well, at this point, I believe the plan is being designed to include the left turn lane. So the developer, what the developer is proposing to the township at this point is to engineer the traffic aspects of the plan, including the Winks Lane intersection, to the specs that they've already previously presented to TPD that have been reviewed preliminarily by PennDOT as part of the HOP process. That's what the land development plans will include. And what the developer is saying is they will be responsible for the construction of those off-site improvements. The belief is at this point that those improvements will have a value somewhere between $450,000 and $550,000. And to the extent that the township has traffic impact fees available to it that have already been paid into that district, that $100,000 remains available if the cost of these improvements exceeds $450,000. But this developer has agreed to construct those improvements up to that cost.
Thank you. I have some other questions too as well.
And all of this will be incorporated into the developer's agreement for the project. We've already, assuming council approves the project.
And I certainly appreciate your above and beyond, but I'm just trying to gauge the value of it through the fact that PennDOT could very well come in and require you to put that left-hand turn lane in. Which I would say.
They're doing it.
Well, it's in there now, yeah. I have a few other questions. Let's talk about, I wanted to talk about traffic on State Road, and then I also wanted to talk about that pizza slice that you referred to up in that corner. And is there any way you could put that up on the screen? We can talk about that first. And Mr. Gantz, you're going to be part of this conversation because a lot of it is related to stormwater management. My first question is that, just to confirm, so the grading of that pizza, we'll call it a pizza slice, but that top portion of the property is graded much higher than the rest of the property. Are you proposing that you're going to level that property?
No.
So you're still going to leave the grading as it is?
Leave the grading as it is. It's fully wooded, and it's my understanding that there's probably wetlands there as well. So if we started playing around with the grading of that property, we'd have a host of issues. There is, as I said, an existing stormwater pipe there that we're going to enlarge, and we're also going to move an inlet there. And as I understand it, one of the problems, and I should have mentioned this, and I apologize that I didn't, one of the problems was that stormwater inlet that's currently there and isn't functioning particularly well was never maintained. And we're proposing to incorporate maintaining that into the development agreement.
Okay.
So hopefully.
And I've seen that drain that you're speaking of. I was actually, I toured that site out there. And the concern, two items. One, the drain's coming in from the neighboring property, right? It abuts both properties from what I understood, and it's not really functioning anyway. And there's a culvert that's really between those two properties, and the water runs through that culvert. And then on top of it, the water basin that sits next to or adjacent to that is leveled in an upward direction. So it doesn't appear as if the water runoff is really, let me say the water basin doesn't seem as if it's really working properly at this point because of the way that the grading is around that particular location or around that particular drain. So I guess what I'm looking for, and what I would certainly ask over and above this, above and beyond that you're noting, is the fact that we look at, and this is where Mr. Gantz might come in, as far as making sure that we address that particular issue, because I do know for a fact that it's affecting the neighboring property, as you had stated prior.
If I could suggest.
I'm going to ask Mr. Rice to address that.
Mr. Gantz has something.
Yes. Well, I'm just going to say, we can bring up that other drawing for a second that shows the proposed pipe work in that area. Right at the neck.
Right, the one that I had up before.
Yes,
the pipes?
yes.
Yep. So the ordinance that you're talking about is the one that's right on the property line of the adjacent neighbor to the north.
Yep.
So there's two inlets on this property that are connected together, and then there's a 15-inch pipe that runs to that inlet right along the property line. You're correct. That inlet on the property line, we are proposing to replace because it is in very, very poor shape.
Yeah.
So we're going to replace that, and then from that inlet, there's a pipe out of that inlet that connects into the stormwater system on that northerly neighbor's property.
But do you feel the replacement of that pipe is going to address the water drainage? Because of the fact that when I was out there, the property was kind of in an upward grade, you should say. So it didn't appear as if the water was even getting into the basin to begin with.
At the inlet on the other property?
No, right next to the basin where you're seeing here.
Oh, the two inlets that are on the neighbor. Yeah. Right now, what's happening is water is running off of his property and, the surrounding area, and it's collecting in the low spot.
Correct.
At the corner of these properties, and especially on this property that we're talking about, and it is backing up onto that neighbor's property, and it's ponding to a level where those existing inlets are. And those existing inlets are higher than the grade that is, downstream of that. So it's ponding to a point until it can drain through those inlets. Until that point, it is sitting there. So what our proposal was to do was to add in a pipe and a head wall at a lower elevation. So it'll start collecting at the beginning of the storm, it'll collect sooner, and it's also a larger pipe, so it should be able to drain that area much faster.
Got it.
And then that's what and there's a new route for the pipe that still comes to that same inlet. So it's still, all that water is still going to the same spot, but it's going to drain at a faster rate,
And does that
earlier on.
Does that exit into the basin? That new pipe that you're going to put in?
The new pipe into our detention basin?
Yes.
No, because our detention basin doesn't get any of that water right now. So we can't increase the flows into that detention basin.
So then where's it going to go?
It's going into the existing storm sewer system that it goes to now. They're
Okay.
two different, I think
Okay.
off-site they go to the same spot, but on our site they come off of our property at two different locations.
Got it, okay. Mr. Gantz, just a question for you too as well. With the grading of that particular piece of property, are you concerned about the water runoff there? Because obviously that's part of what's creating this problem.
Well, I think with the proposed improvements plus the improvements to the two existing inlets, it should handle that area where the water lays after a storm and takes it off site. If you grade off that triangular section that we talked about, you'll be totally removing all vegetation, a couple of feet.
Understood, but to keep in mind is that property looks pretty bad back there, and it's, there's a lot of trash. If I remember correctly, when I was there was larger, what appears maybe oil drums back there. Is that all going to be cleaned up?
Yes, of course.
You're putting a fence up too, or is it?
Correct.
Okay.
Please come up to the microphone. Introduce yourself and
Okay. Drew DeWitt, Senior Vice President with Ivy Realty.
First, spell your last name.
DeWitt, D-E-W-I-T-T.
Andrew or Drew?
Drew, just Drew.
Be sworn.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Okay, so there's a lot of nuances with this in that, and before I say anything, I should really say, I know I look young, but I've overseen about 40 projects, industrial developments in my career. And I've learned from that time that we like to always go in and not be a bull in a china shop. We like to work with the community, and I think that's exactly what Doug is saying. So we have tried to go above and beyond to be a good neighbor and address these issues. So the issue right now is, my understanding from our engineer, I think the impression is that the mounds that were put there when Charming Shops was developed, the runoff is actually coming from that. That isn't the fact. Actually, 85% of the runoff that goes to that low point is from the neighboring property. So it's coming, 8.9 acres is all pretty much paved area where the crane company was, and then there's a truck or another warehouse building. It's coming across all that open space to our property. So we're at the low point, and we're basically going to be draining all that to the existing stormwater system. So we wanted to address the water because it's actually ponding on our property. So I think everybody wins with that. We're addressing the water issue. We are going to put the fence up because we agree. We've got the drums out there, people are dumping, there's trash, it does not look good.
Yep.
So we said, all right, we should definitely put a fence up. We should also adjust, write within the development management or development agreement with the town that will clean that. If we don't, we should get violations.
Yep.
Be fined for that, so we're fine with that. We will keep it clean and tidy and landscape it. But we believe actually leveling that will only increase the water flow because now it can't be caught in that highly vegetated area and it'll flow even quicker, right, Chris? To that lower area.
We could create a problem for the downstream.
if you're going to speak, come up and speak at the microphone, please. People at home can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry about that. Yeah, one thing, we don't want to create a problem for the neighbor downstream too. So if we, say level that area and let that water flow, it would flow through our property onto that downstream property, and that could create issues downstream. So we're trying to manage, these issues as best as we can, with the existing stormwater system and on our property.
Okay.
So you're saying that there's water running off the property next door onto your property? And that's where part of the problem is?
85%.
Yeah, the majority of the water, like 85% of the drainage area to this downstream corner is the gravel, parking areas and buildings on those properties.
Right, but is it coming off the property next door too, or is it all from your property? I thought you said it was coming off other property also.
It's coming off, I think, the two properties that are Mr. Wesley's property, then the one that's just south of that.
You have water runoff coming off of other people's property onto your property.
Correct. You're right. It's getting runoff from those properties.
And I don't disagree that his property could very well contribute to it as well, but I'm not sure if it's 85%, but certainly taking care of a longtime business owner here in Bensalem, while we're out there doing this work, would certainly be appreciative to take care of a neighbor, that's for sure. Yep. I wanted to also talk about some of the traffic impact that we spoke of, and maybe Mr. Roth can help provide some information. I do have concern and question related to the fact that there's not going to be an additional traffic impact, and the reason being is because previously Charming Shops was there and we had vehicular traffic, and I'm not sure if they operated on a 24-hour basis, but from what I understand, this warehouse is going to be on a 24-hour basis, and in addition to the fact that we're not seeing vehicular traffic, we're seeing truck traffic. And I'm not an engineer, but I do realize that truck traffic could very well have an impact on the infrastructure of State Road, more so than the vehicular traffic that we currently saw with Charming Shops. So how are you getting to the point where there is no additional traffic impact on State Road?
Well, the additional impact, when you're referring to impact as far as impact fee, that's during weekday afternoon peaks only. And when we study, impact of traffic, we study it during the peak hours, worst conditions that it would face out there. So in this case, it would be both the morning peak and the afternoon peak. So we do look at that. I don't disagree that this particular facility is going to see increased truck traffic as compared to the Charming Shops. So the overall traffic may be reduced. Truck traffic will increase. However, that truck traffic that's coming and going from the facility is traveling primarily on State Road, some other roads that are within the industrial park. The infrastructure of those roads are already established to withstand the impact of those heavier vehicles. So the makeup, the cross-section of those roads, the base of those roads are all designed to withstand the impact of truck traffic, since it's already out there.
Okay. And then one last question. Are you concerned, and I know we get some water down there on State Road, are you concerned about any particular water issue with some of that truck traffic that will be going back in there?
Well, I think what's going to happen in this case is with the improvements that are going in along State Road, with the improvements that are going on at the access point, as well as the proposed improvements at State Road and Winks Lane. As part of the township's review as well as the state's review, a full drainage report would have to be done.
Okay.
So if there is a drainage issue out there, or if the grading is not up to standard, it would be corrected and drainage facilities would be installed.
Okay.
So I think the overall improvement, you'll see a substantial benefit to the drainage.
All right, thank you. And then one final thing on the traffic. from what I understand, there are times, and this is across the street from the Chamonix State Park, and from what I understand, I believe it's more on holidays where you're seeing cars that are parking along State Road. Do you foresee an issue with, I don't want to say increased truck traffic, but the safety concern with all those trucks going in and out of there that's directly across the street from the park? And if you have cars that are parking there, again, I realize it's not every day, but do you think that there should be something, maybe some type of signage as far as no parking to mitigate any issue there that could very well happen?
No, I mean, obviously, there could be some type of static signs put up for no parking. However, in that particular case, then you're putting up signs for a situation that may or may not occur, or may occur once or twice a year. Then I think the question goes back to the township. It becomes an enforcement issue. Once you put no parking signs up, then it's an enforcement issue. What I can say in this particular case, the improvements that are being installed along State Road, we're widening the roadway, installing left turn lanes. So we are creating additional pavement out there. So I think if there is to be parking on the side of the road where there shouldn't be, I think we're providing a little additional width to not only passenger vehicles but trucks. So I think we're bettering the situation that you described.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that should do it for now at this point.
Okay, does
Thank you.
anybody else have any questions at this time?
There's a letter in here from the Bucks County Planning Commission. They had a comment regarding sidewalks and curbs. And I know that you're, applying for a fee in lieu of the sidewalks. But their comment notes that, State Road is envisioned as a segment of both the Delaware River Heritage Trail and the East Coast Greenway. And I know that in just recent meetings, we've applied for grants for those projects where we're trying to extend these walking trails throughout the township. Wouldn't we want to see sidewalks put in as part of those trails? Isn't that the vision of the township?
I don't believe the trails are on the side of the industrial park. They're on the other side of the state park.
They're on the other side.
Right, and to put sidewalks over there, that would only go a short way.
Well, that's what I'm
isn't
trying
gonna
to
help
figure
anybody.
out.
I'm just saying that the trail part is going to be on the state road side, the river side, going up and around in the Chamonix Creek further up.
And some of the wilderness trails, from what Tony Belfer used to tell us, but they tend not to be cement, they tend to be like this little stone. More natural material.
Exactly, okay. I'm just making sure that this is not directly connected to that.
And the monies that would be put in lieu of could be used for matching and anything having to do those gravel, safety sidewalks and stuff down the road. So that's it for this.
Okay. You did mention that the revised plan was basically intended to comply with the comments from the fire marshal. Do we have any review that can confirm that?
It's doing the will comply, so.
Just a will comply?
Yes, we will comply. If we have not already, we will comply with it.
Okay. And if this gets approved, when do you expect construction to begin?
Construction, asked my client that this evening. It's fairly aggressive, but they're hoping to start construction in November.
Okay, and what's the anticipated duration of construction?
That I didn't ask. 12 months.
12 months, okay. And approximately how many jobs do you think this will bring?
As I understand it, and I probably should defer to my client, what they do is they rent this building out, and it could be to one user or it could be to multiple users. They're currently negotiating with some, including some that want the entire facility.
Okay.
So they don't have anything yet, and it depends on different types of uses. Some are like food uses, some are more staple goods that might sit there for a while. So there's a lot of different possibilities. We have 175 parking stalls. And if you have, one of these might be running 3 shifts, so you could, I don't do the math, but
Potentially
probably close to
several hundred
500
jobs.
employees could be there, working full-time.
Okay.
If you're running 3 shifts a day. From what I understand.
Doug, let me interrupt you just for a second. They told me 250 jobs.
That's one person, or I'm sorry, one company that they're negotiating with now. Every everybody, from what I understand, that they're negotiating with is in that range. But I don't want to lock into a number without, a tenant that's locked in.
When you're looking at a building that size with what's there,
And
you're
the
only
money that-
looking at 2 or 3, and my imagination goes wild with the 2 or 3 that it might be, because it would be a big plus. It could probably be a lot more than 10.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the benefit to the township and the tax revenue that would come in. So, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to add,
No, I had several, but they were addressed as the evening went on.
I just had one add-on question to Mr. Sloan's point. Just as a history thing, because Charming Chops has been out of there since when?
They sold in January. I'm not sure when the building was vacated. Do you know? Mr. DeWitt estimates about 1.5 years ago the building was vacated.
Okay, so right now it's been vacant for 1.5 years.
Yes.
So it's 250 jobs.
It's better than zero.
Not many jobs now.
Right.
Okay, that's, I just wanted, I wasn't sure about it.
Yep.
I knew it was, but
Before I go to the audience, Mr. Paisley, do you have anything?
Just one thing. I know that the review memo and I believe Mr. Maloney both commented on the fact that the property and the plan show the access point coming in off of State Road, and that there's an existing access point on Haunted Lane as well. I'm not sure that you said this, Doug, but the plan is to close off the Haunted Lane access point to everyday traffic and have it available just for emergency access. So
That is reflected on the plans, I believe.
it is,
Yeah.
but the public may be interested. We have some issues on Haunted Lane, and that we would be taking away one of the access points in what's been a troublesome area for the township. So I thought
and the
that
definition
should
of
be
an emergency.
noted for the public.
emergency Vehicles, right? I mean.
Yes, that's correct. The Haunted Lane access is only for emergency access.
Police, fire,
Fire.
anything else? Mr. Gans, you have anything to add to this?
No, I do not.
Small, sorry. Can we get signage at those entrances at Winks and on State Road
I'm sorry?
for employee entrance and trucks only?
Who wants to answer that? Signage?
Well, have Mr. Worster, I'd like Mr. Worster to comment. on
Okay.
that.
Mr. Worster can answer it.
Winks should only be, should be no trucks.
Understood. And, obviously you can't put a sign there at the intersection to avoid from trucks making the left-hand turn, especially being that you're widening State Road. It could very well introduce, the idea of them making the left and then making a right.
Well, you're right, but it's a tough move. I mean, design-wise, it's coming out of the loading docks, making a hard right, then a hard left to get out of there. It's going to take considerable effort to go either way on that. And certainly, we could always put up signs. We could do that. We can ask them if it's appropriate to put up those signs in a meaniful way.
Not to
But
interrupt, but I think you said, well, wings shouldn't be used as trucks, but it may be on occasion or something like that.
I mean, I guess if somebody a truck driver got confused and made the wrong turn or something like that, but.
Yeah, and I'm only saying if it's going, I'm
I
trying to
don't
think.
want to mislead you guys, so we may multi-tenant the building, as Doug has indicated, we may lease it to 2, 3 people, right? And one may want access off Winks if that's where their offices are. So we cannot commit to restricting trucks to only use the State Road entrance, because we may need to use the Winks Road entrance as well.
Okay, but you just heard that they're going to have a difficult time getting into that entrance as it is.
We've designed the entrance, and Mark can go into detail, to allow for those trucks to get in. And he can go through that in detail. It's not going to be the primary entrance, that's not the goal, but we can't restrict trucks not to enter off of Winks Lane if they so choose. You wanna-
I mean, the thing is, the other thing here is that it's part of, this property is part of a much larger industrial complex.
I realize that.
Okay, and that industrial complex in Winks Lane travels back to that industrial complex. So, the counter argument to that is that if trucks do enter the site via, the back roads or Winks Lane. Now you're preventing them from turning left or right in and out of Winks Lane, bringing them to the intersection, turning onto State Road, turning back into the property. So I think as Mr. DeWitt mentioned, we see primarily State Road being used as the truck access. Okay, that's where the loading docks are. It's going to be, the majority of traffic is going to enter and exit the site via State Road. However, it's being designed for truck traffic onto Winks. Also, what would be the restriction? There may be other types of trucks that want to use Winks Lane that may not be the larger tractor trailers.
Excuse me, but
I think
it was our understanding, Phil, that that was not going to be a truck entrance. We were talking about that and said, no, it was not. It was going to be for cars. Now, I'm deaf in one ear, but he's got two, so.
That was clear to me that was going to be
Come up to the microphone.
It was clear to me that was going to be for no trucks. And so to me, it should be no trucks, and they could use the new intersection at Winks and State if they have to, if a truck gets lost on Winks Lane. And that was part of the rationale regarding the improvements at Winks and State as well. That Winks is our road, so we want trucks to stay, even though it goes to an industrial park, we want trucks where we can. They're on State Road. Let's keep them on State Road.
Okay, I have another question, not to change about Wings, but the emergency exit, is that marked properly that that's an emergency exit? Like, what makes an emergency exit? Is there a pole, or is there a lock that emergency people can use, or like how do people know how to use that?
I don't know what the treatment is specifically on that. It's open now, but it'll be closed as part of this, and we'll work with the fire department and everyone else to make sure it's a gate or something.
Fire and emergency.
Yep. Yes.
So an employee would just be able to pull in there?
No.
I think we have to,
Clarify that.
yeah.
Well, we have to make it part of our.
If
Right.
if it goes to a
Right.
motion, you make it part
Yep.
of the motion.
Okay.
I understand what they're saying, that they're gonna have, they may rent to 3 people, and it may not be convenient to go around where the
Yeah,
other
and
people are in and out of.
It's
And I
different if
get-
it's a FedEx truck coming in to deliver packages,
Right.
but not tractor trailers.
What if there was a weight restriction or something put on there to keep the tractor trailers and do it if they're smaller? If you run into a smaller person, they're not gonna have as many tractor trailers, but if that was one of the things that was agreed upon with everybody, then that's something that I think we should seriously look at.
Can I just,
Couple things to say. So the traffic study, Mark, correct, allowed for larger trucks, and it was reflected in what was submitted. Our design allows for larger trucks.
Correct, yeah, both driveways were designed to handle a tractor trailer if needed. Now, the State Road entrance was the primary tractor trailer, and all the loading docks are on State Road, and there's a few along on the
Well, how did Mr.
right
Rhodes
side.
get so convinced that that wasn't the case?
And
He's
I'm
a
there.
tra- he's a traffic engineer
Maybe
too.
because we told Phil that the primary entrance is off state, which it is. That's accurate and true. And we will be trying to direct everyone to the State Road entrance. And that's the most direct entrance off of Interstate 95, which is where the trucks are going to be coming.
well, that was kind of the idea of proposing the signage.
Right,
you
so
know.
the signage, we can encourage
Yeah.
them to go there, but people get lost, how do you...
And I understand if someone makes a mistake,
Yeah.
that's fine, I
Right.
get it. But, but especially being that you have a lot of employee parking over there, I'd be concerned about the safety.
I would agree with that.
And then just a quick question also for Mr. Roth, and I don't mean to, I'm not trying to argue with you. My only concern,
I'm not interrupting you.
no, that's
Yeah,
fine.
just to hold.
My only concern also was thinking of if you did have increased truck traffic making the left at that light, well, how far back are you making that left-hand turn lane to accommodate how many trucks are coming in there in an hour at the peak time of morning or afternoon? And could that even handle it? And then are you going to see traffic being backed up on State Road for it?
Right, and I agree with you, but as reflected in the traffic study that was reviewed by the township, the percentage of trucks is not coming down State Road and turning left onto Winks.
Yeah.
The reason for the truck access or allowing trucks to access Winks Lane was for them coming via Winks Lane.
Right.
Okay, so the distribution of traffic and truck traffic in the traffic study shows the distribution to and from Winks Lane, not out to State Road or turning left from State Road on the Winks. That's what
It's a
was
straight up
presented.
coming off of 95 down to State Road, coming up to the location.
And I agree,
Going up-
primarily that will be the route.
Right, going up State Road into Croydon, Bristol, going across the bridge or something.
Right.
That's where the main part of your traffic's going to be.
Right, correct.
Okay. No.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Philip?
Yeah.
Come up to the microphone, please.
Listen, you know, I don't want to muddy the waters associated with this, but we had the clear understanding that trucks were going to be using the State Road access, and that was it. So I have no problem signing it. One of our arguments associated with you know, I don't want to get onto a soapbox associated with this, but I am your advocate, and I made that clear to them, to the applicant, that, you know, one of the reasons we asked for State and Winks to be built was because of them exacerbating an already poor condition there, and putting trucks on Winks at that location exacerbates a poor condition. So while their traffic volume might be lighter than it was with Charming Shops, which is cars, which is already put up, versus the impact of trucks, there's clearly an impact. There's a clear impact. So trucks should be restricted to State Road. And you could get everywhere on that site coming in and out of State Road, and that's where the trucks belong.
And that's something to take into consideration when a motion is made, if a motion is made.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the board? Anything else in our turn? All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this project?
Alan Windsor, 3232 Azalea Avenue. This is real quick. I like the improvements as far as the environmental work that's being done on there. I used to drive trucks, and I used to go to Charming Shops to pick stuff up, so trucks did go in a Charming Shop, and I'd come off of Route 13 and make the right turn in there, so it's not unfeasible for that to happen. It's easier to get in off of Winks Lane than it is to go around State Road. Okay, my only other problem is all the water that's going into these retention basins, is this just supposed to seep into the ground, or is it being distributed somewhere else, like to Neshaminy Creek, or, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
My understanding is the water from the retention basin will be let out into
The existing wastewater management system.
Yeah, off-site runoff will be less than prior. There will be some measures for infiltration,
right, and then
for the water quality.
Right, so that'll all be handled according to whoever's.
Yeah, it's in the review. It shows how the runoff will be actually a little less.
Gardens and different things
Rain
like that.
gardens, perk pit, yes.
Anyone else in the audience like to come forward? Can you identify yourself for the court's denied?
Yes, good evening. James Kelly. I work for Mr. Joseph Wesley, owner of 777 Winks Lane. I've worked for him for almost 40 years. I was involved with building our property back in 1980, and also quite familiar with the Charming Shops property that we've been having problems for a while. I listened to some of the things that were spoken to tonight. I know that I sent you a couple different letters, just letting you know our concerns. I know, we'd really like to see the pizza, as they call it. We call it the forgotten pizza, because it's just in that, we have a land development going on here, and, every piece of the property should be considered with land development. And this pizza portion that fronts on the Winks Lane, I heard one comment, well, we can't level it. And we're not really saying to level it, we're saying to clean it up. Don't increase the stormwater downstream, deal with it right there on that pizza slice. Somebody had said, well, there's wetland concerns on it. We don't want to open up, them kind of concerns. Well, the property from the dumping that is going on there is, according to their topos, is anywhere between 7 and 8 feet higher than our property. So I don't see how there can be any wetland problems on it. Before, that was graded like that and dumped on, I mean, the old Rollins building and, our property, the water did come down and shed that way, but it shed naturally. And, once they built that dirt up there, they locked it in. And then also with the Charming Shops plan, there was another head wall that was designed to go into their detention basin that they built. As I was fortunate enough to find a couple letters, that it was engineered that way, but it was never built that way. And over the years, as the vegetation, mostly suckers and weed trees have grown up in there, it's just been getting worse and worse with the stormwater on our property. And as far as putting a fence along Winks Lane, I see where they put some right-of-way stakes in this weekend. And wherever the fence goes from there, I mean, I don't see, it'll keep people from dumping inside the fence, but still outside the fence. I don't know what the setback line is for a fence, but there'll still be dumping that goes on there, because even the one portion of their property along Winks Lane has a fence in there, but you have to look in to see it because the trees are crushing it down and it's just rotted out. I mean, if they're not going to be maintaining this piece of property like they should their whole property, then it'll just turn into the, perpetual eyesore that it is. But we would really ask that, you consider having them clean up that portion of property. Don't want to, increase the flow downstream, but, just deal with the water on the property itself. But we just, being longtime folks of Bensalem, I lived in Bensalem most of my life. Found my wife here, and, our whole family's still here. So we just have, we're Bensalem, we've been Bensalem, but we just asked you for, some consideration with our request.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yes.
Did you complain to the township about Charming Shop when the Charming Shop was there? Or is that coming up new because there's a new development going on? Because this has been going on for a lot of years, by people who are using that. I just want to get an understanding of when the problem started and why it's coming up now, not before.
We complained to Charming Shops about it some years ago, and they added 2 inlets to our property that go by stormwater pipe over towards Ward Drive there, to this old dilapidated inlet and within the piles of dirt. And it helped, but it never really corrected the problem. And now as the growth on the property just gets more mature and more mature, I guess the roots come up higher, and it's been just a continual flooding problem, but it's been getting worse over the years. I don't believe we did file a complaint with the township, no.
I just want to get a
Yep. We always tried to work with our neighbors rather than, calling the police on them, but
It seems like a couple of the things you mentioned, I did read your letter too.
Thank you.
Prior. But it seems like a couple of things you mentioned, like putting a fence up and making them responsible for not only cleaning it up, but being responsible for maintaining that area. Well, they said that they're gonna do that, we're gonna, we voted this, we're gonna make sure they do it. And also, you mentioned they should keep the water in there, well, that's what they said they're doing. I mean, that, you may not believe that they're gonna do it, that's what they said they're doing, am I correct? So, it seems like a couple of things that you mentioned that you want, they already said that they agree
Well,
to
as
do.
long as, you know, I know they said quite a few things, but as long as the property is cleaned up. I mean, there's a couple mature trees in there, maybe 2 or 3, but the rest are just sucker trees and weeds that are growing. But as long as it can be cleaned up and, you know, look good, because even out by Winks Lane there, I don't know, you know, if they put a fence there, I can just see, you know, it seems like their business plan, according to their website, is to develop it, you know, buy it right, develop it, and then sell it within 5 years. So, you know, I can just see a long-term thing down the road here. After this meeting's over, it's built and everything, they have their grand opening, and then Winks Lane, you know, that little pizza slice, you know, just starts to rot away.
I mean, I know what he's referring
They'll
to.
always be responsible for maintaining that property once this meeting is done. This wasn't done before when Charming Shop had it. The restrictions and things that are going to be put on if this board does decide to go forward is going to take care of that. Mr. Gaines, is any of the water runoff coming from the Imquit property onto this property?
I think it settles down in the lower corner.
They have water
It all
runoff
comes
onto
to
the other property?
Yes, it settles in the corner of the Amquip property, adjacent to this property.
But it doesn't come onto this property? Into
A little bit, I believe there's some runoff, isn't there?
Right there by the adjoining property lines, yeah, that's where the water collects,
Yeah,
since
there
they
is
built that berm there.
Okay, so that would
Gaines,
have to be taken
I'm sorry.
care of. That would have to be taken care of too, because you can't run your water onto somebody else's property, correct?
Well, you
Any
did
direct-
see the drawing they showed, they're putting in a drain pipe to pick up that.
Pick up that water?
Yes.
So the people that are looking to do this are looking to take care of that issue and that problem. Okay.
Ron, I have a question for you.
Wait a minute, Mr. Wesley's trying to get up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's got a question for this person.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we'll take care of this.
Okay, and Ron, my question is this. Mr. Kelly said, you know, we want to clean up the property, and I think that's what their intention is. When you say clean it up, you mean relative to debris and trash and things like that? Is that correct? Is that my interpretation?
No, I mean, as far as the piles of dirt, the extreme elevation of the property with the piles of dirt, like I said, it's only a pizza slice, it's just a wedge, and the elevation is in between 7 and 8 feet above our property. And you know, when you walk it, you're walking up and down all the piles. And I just meant, you know, clean it up so it's, you know, presentable, so it looks like, you know, like land development happened here and there was an improvement to the entire property. This isn't an off-site improvement, it's an on-site improvement. Let's just have it, you know, if you're going to develop the property, clean up the whole property.
Right, but it's been there for a long time, and there's never been any complaints that the township filed, that the township couldn't go into Charming Shop and said, clean your property, right? It was just you talking to the people at Charming Shop.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever been any complaints, to tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you. Ed, are you completed?
Yes, I'll follow through with Mr. Maloney afterwards.
Okay. Hang on a second. Did you have another question?
Yeah, just 2 things. The cleanup of the property, I mean, I think the developer is going to be required to clean up some of it to put that fence in. So I guess the question is, if you're going to do that, then you're going to have some type of landscaper, I would imagine, out there. I mean, is there any possibility that, and I'm not saying excavate it, all I'm saying is you have some brush. I'm not saying take down trees, but he's just saying clean it up to make it look clean, if you will. In addition to the fact that, and Mr. Gantz or Mr. Paizo has a question for you as well. When you have that brush that's an overgrowth or an encroaching on easement property, they would still be required, if it goes outside of the fence, can you just confirm that they would still be required to clean that up?
Yes, they have to maintain their property.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. So then it goes back to the question as far as just some of the landscaping that is needed to clean up that property a little bit.
And
I'm sorry, I'd like to butt in a little bit here. I'm Joe Wesley,
Sorry, sir, say your name?
Joseph L. Wesley,
WBS?
L-E-Y, that's right. Mrs. Wesley and I are the original owners of the property. As Amquip moved in there, the Crane people and we've been in the community for 40 years. We started our business there. We raised our family in Eddington, if anybody remembers the name of Eddington, that turned into Cornwall Heights, that turned into Bensalem. I love this township. And with it, I think that the folks here that come in here to develop this piece of property come in here with dirty hands to start with. That's the way I see it. And that is because the first time they showed their plan on this property, it wasn't showing their piece of pizza. It wasn't. Not at all. It wasn't even talked about. When you'd seen it on the screen the first way is the way the first people that listened to it. I'm nervous over this because it just shocks the heck out of me for that jungle to grow there and for us to be a good neighbor to Charm Shop in turning around and them filling that when they built their office building over there. They built it up so high that it wound up backing up. And we wound up trying to be decent neighbors, moving our equipment around on the property to get the most use out of it as it was flooding, as the property that they bought there turned around and got created by Charm Shop doing it. So I think we were trying to be good neighbors all the time. But they didn't bring up that there was a flooding there at all, you know, or any problem of it. We brought it up when it was time for any comments from the audience. And they've really disvalued the property that I have. It's up for sale right now. I'm going on 82 years old. And I'm nervous about this because it's not the right thing to do to this community, to turn around and have a jungle inside of a nice industrial park. And if you ever drove past our place down there on Links Lane at Amquip, that place always looks sharp and neat and nice. These people coming in here want to leave a jungle there to start with. And I'm against that 101%. I just don't think it's fair to the industrial park or the roads in the industrial park. I don't know if there are roads that we were responsible for or going to be responsible, or does the township have them roads to? Are they, the township will redo those roads if they break apart with more trucks going through there, or who will? Or will the industrial park have to pay for them? Does anybody know that?
They're township roads, would be responsible.
And to look at it, the property that you have there now.
Yes.
Has trucks and cranes and things that go off the property.
Oh, yes.
So it's putting
yes,
stuff on there too. So it's not any different than you use. But my question, I'll ask you the same question I asked this gentleman. You've owned that property for a long time.
Yes.
Why didn't somebody complain about this jungle way back when?
It wasn't a jungle way back then. It was level property to my property.
When Charming Shop started doing what they did,
yes.
These people didn't do it. They were buying the property.
They bought it just the same way I would buy a piece of property.
Charming Shop built up that property and made it so it was really bad. Nobody complained to the township that was done.
You didn't know about it until it happened, and it was years later. It didn't happen at first. It didn't happen in the first 10 or 15 years we were there. As it got overgrown and junk got thrown on it, we adjusted away from the puddle that got created by the property that they bought.
Mr. Wesley, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just trying to understand. How long has that been going on? How many years?
I would say at least the last 10 years.
And nobody called the township to complain about that stuff happening.
No,
That's what I don't understand. How could we could have stopped them if you would have called or whoever was running your facilities there or whatever was going on.
Right.
Said, hey, this is happening. Can we get somebody out here? That's what the mayor's job is and building and planning's job is to stop people from doing that.
It was already done. That's my point that I'm trying to make. That stuff was dumped in there when the office building was built. The office building wasn't built when Charm Shop was doing their main business across the street from us on Lance Lane. It was later. And that's how it got over there, even where they were supposed to have an outlet from our property into their draining detention basin there was in the plans that the township had. That was never put in.
Understood. I'm just trying to
So
understand.
why did the township then do the job with making sure that basin was put in there that came into that catch basin?
I can't answer that question for you either.
You have the letters here. You have the letters here that shows you that that was supposed to be there. It's not there to this day.
Yeah. My only question is, if they're willing to do work now to improve the water situation on that lot, and I feel bad about the condition it's in, but these new people, it's a vacant property now, and they're improving the situation. They're not making it worse. Are you arguing that they're going to make it worse?
If they grade it off, the top high piles that are 8 feet.
So are you arguing that they're going to make it worse?
They're going to make it worse. They're going to stop
They're
it.
not grading it off, they said. They don't want to grade it off. That's what they said. Your guy said to grade it off.
No, we're asking that it be cleaned up,
I know,
including,
but they don't want to grade it off because they said it would create a bigger problem for this. They said that they're going to improve the water removal from that detention.
With that one
And
place
handle
that
it
they're
there.
saying, yes, they are, no question about it.
And then they're going to put up a fence, they're going to clean it up, so I,
But when they put the fence up, you're going to start another jungle.
okay, well, even if you could, anybody could put a fence up, and, well, I could put a fence up in my house, and people start dumping stuff outside my fence, I have to call the police. Or I have to
Right.
maintain or get a camera or call the police, or,
Right.
even.
you can't argue that
in all
someone's
due
going to dump
respect,
next to
all
his
the-
fence.
All the trash that would blow down the road and the leaves that'll collect on the fences.
Really,
Well,
Well, we're just
that's an
mistaken
issue
as-
that comes down to whether or not they're gonna maintain it. And if they're not maintaining it, then they can be reported to the township and we can fine them. And they acknowledge that already, that they're willing to maintain it and take on that responsibility and that liability to maintain it.
Mr. Maloney, could I ask Mr. Maloney a question? You've heard what Mr. Wesley said.
Yes.
You guys said earlier in this that you are going to maintain that property and keep that property clean and keep that property, weeds growing out of it and stuff. You're going to maintain that area.
As a condition of
That's one the
approval,
things that's part of the condition, right?
yes,
And then we're being developed.
yes.
You know, that's before.
That was my understanding, so.
And if someone comes and destroys the fence, for instance, and starts throwing stuff inside there, then you have to fix the fence.
We have to clean it up, and we have to
Clean it up,
replace the
fix the
fence.
fence again.
We're going to keep and install and maintain I think a 6-foot-high chain link fence around the property. And we'll maintain it. If somebody rips it down, we have to put it up.
Trash blows down and it blows up against the fence, you guys are going to have somebody go out and clean it.
Absolutely.
You're going to maintain it because you have a business there that's running and wants to look like a professional business too. Right?
And generally, in 5 years, I'm not saying you're planning on selling the property in 5 years, I don't know where that came from, but if you sold the property in 5 years, you have to pass on those obligations to whoever buys the property, right?
That obligation runs with the land, so any subsequent purchaser would have to comply with it.
That's what I'm thinking here, that same problem that Charming Shop created for me, it runs with it, well, get rid of the problem then. Because I didn't have that problem before. Our ground was.
Well, you had the problem before with Charming Shop.
Our ground, no, our
No,
ground.
with Charming Shop, at some point, you had that problem.
Yes, Charming Shop.
Okay, well then,
Right.
our question was, why didn't you resolve it with Charming Shops at the time the problem was created?
I didn't realize it right then.
Okay.
Well, I will note that
It came in the
since,
last 10 years or even less.
Okay.
And that started to flood. And it's because of the growth that's there that is
I
truly
understand.
jungle.
right.
I understand.
You know, if any one of you would go down and look at that, you'd say, this don't belong in our township. It is a
But the
jungle.
question is, the last 10 years, you did nothing about it. You didn't go to Charming Shop, you didn't come to the township. Now it changed hands and they want to upgrade it, make it look better, and take care of the water problems. Now you have a problem.
That's
Where
right.
were you 10 years ago, in the last 10 years?
No, it started, that's what I'm saying, in the last 10 years.
But we never know about it. Nobody reported it to the township.
But I guess, I was down there, I saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what you're referring to. You're not asking to take the trees down. And if the developer's committing to clean it,
Yes, they are.
oh, you want trees down?
They want everything cleared out there. Well,
Not the full growth trees.
Really?
The junk trees, that's what we're saying.
Right.
To make it look nice for the rest of the community that lives in there.
and they're saying that they're going to clean that piece of property
I
up.
hear you, but when they came here the first day, you were in front of the first board, there wasn't the engineers picked that up. that
Right.
pizza polish.
So I wanted to note to you that since that meeting, they've revised their plans. The plans that are in front of us were submitted less than 2 weeks ago that address a lot of your comments. And they added in this new stormwater pipe that's gonna address a lot of this flooding. They've added in this fence. They're willing to commit to maintaining the property at this point. So that not only are they hearing what you had to say, but they're complying with it. They wanna work with you. And that's the plans that we have in front of us, that they heard your comments and they incorporated them into the new design.
Well, yes,
It sounds like not 100% to what you desire.
That's what I was thinking, right. But it is to the point that they said that, you know, we'll be fair with it, we'll take care of it. And then they come over and said, well, they're gonna put one drain in over there. Am I right, Jim?
One drain, yeah.
That's
And
it.
as far as cleaning up the property,
Well, it's not just one drain. It's a bigger drain, it's more effective, it's lower, it will handle a lot of the runoff, more that's already coming. It will now be able to mitigate that from flooding.
That's why I'm saying it would have to be dropped then.
It's,
Well, the engineers, Ron's going to.
they've engineered it that way.
And then just take care of the water that's running off your property onto their property with the piping that they put on there, because you're not able, you shouldn't be running water off of your property onto somebody else's, because it's against county law. So
Right,
they're
right.
doing that, they're
Yeah.
taking care of that,
Can't
they're
see it,
charging
right?
you for it, they're taking care of
Yeah,
it.
but if you would look in your
they don't show nothing.
folder
This is
there,
the original
where
plan.
we turned around and the township had told them years ago to.
You get a copy of the letter.
It's-
Because here's what it's laying out here. See, he's showing up. The two letters that I gave you from the Charmin shops.
But that had to deal with the charter shops.
That did.
That has nothing to do with
Right.
being here today.
Right, right.
Nobody
I-
ever brought
No.
charter shop to the township and said they're not holding up to whatever they were supposed to do. So now you're bringing it up and saying you want these guys to do it. Which I
Well,
understand.
since land development's going on, you're right. I mean, that's what
And
we're
then
in here
you're
asking
telling them
for.
what you want to suit you.
No,
not what the
this is
township.
me.
No, we're asking the township.
You
We're
just said
just saying don't flood us.
you said you're selling the property.
And I think-
This eyesore, so.
Yeah, but they're saying that water's coming off your property onto their
It's
property.
been coming off.
It doesn't-
Here it is at the
but they're not
township,
flooding
so that-
you.
That was what was accepted,
I understand, but
to come down on us.
Right.
But not flood us, it was to go towards them drains. And because they put their stuff in there after
Ron,
the
is
drains
water
were in,
from
they built the
this property
property.
flooding Amcliffe?
There's a low area of Amherst, a rear corner, and floods or this high
Right.
elevation there until the inlets and things like that. The plan for this project, I can't. Here, is for an additional pipe and a pipe run of several hundred feet to carry this water off back into the inlet that exists today and rebuild that inlet because it's in poor condition. And
So it's
then
not
that,
minor improvements, is it minor?
it's just it's a major pipe. It's not just an inlet. It's
So it's not,
several
they're not
hundred
doing a little
feet.
thing, they're trying to do.
So they are addressing this flooding
The whole
concern.
jungle that is there. You see the jungle, right? That's all, it's a jungle. I mean, it's really.
But they are committing to
Clean it up as best they can.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Just wait, Mayor. Please, turn your microphone on, please. What I'm saying to you is this has been going on for 10 years, and you never once complained about it. Now you have to complain about it. If we would have known about it 10 years ago, you wouldn't have the jungle. If we would have known about it 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you wouldn't have the jungle that's there now. But because Charmin Shop's out and somebody else is trying to redo it, help fix the roads, fix the intersections and stuff, you're coming in and saying, now I have a problem with this. And I'm saying to the township, I have a problem with this. That's what I'm trying to understand. Because if you've seen this going and going and going in for 10 years, why did you never not say anything? So we could have gotten taken care of before it got to this point.
Well,
That's the only thing I'm.
I think we're past that point now. I mean,
Yeah, we are
that's
past that point.
that's 10 years ago, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Gantz, the pipe that you're referring to, is that the same one that we're referring to as far as the one that's not functional there? Or is that two different projects?
This is a totally separate pipe.
Separate pipe, and then in addition, let me just clarify, in
Well, look,
addition,
I can show it
the
all this-
pipe that's not functional is also going to be rectified.
The inlet that's damaged,
Yes.
that'll be replaced.
So then we're talking about two different, let me say, called projects or improvements.
There it
yeah,
is right there.
To address the flooding.
Right, if you can see the drawing here, the dashed line in the lower left corner below the heavy red line, then there's an inlet there and a pipe and then another pipe going across the site. That's all existing. The new work will be the heavier, I guess it's red, pipe you see going from an end wall. It'll catch the flow, drain it up, and then over to the existing inlet and into the existing storm sewer system. So it's a second pipe system,
Right,
a second
understood.
system.
Right, so two improvements there really to try
I
to
would
address
say
some of that
so.
work. Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor? Okay, we're going to take a couple-minute break. We'll be right back, 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wesley, you had the floor before we left, so.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for hearing me out. I just had to say it because it comes from my heart, and I love this community, and anything as you have done in the past. Keep it going, make it a beautiful community like you have.
And they're going to be held to everything that they say they're going to do, and they're going to be held to the point, so
I believe you guys.
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, guys. Okay, anyone else from the audience like to speak for or against this project? Seeing no one come forward, do we have any other questions from the board?
Mr. Polari, if I might address the Winks Lane access issue very briefly.
You can, but we're going to address it
I know
if it's
you
going
are.
for this board. So you're stuck with whatever we say, but we'll listen to what you have to say.
By way of, my client is genuinely concerned if there was a restriction against trucks, tractor trailers coming in Winks Lane. He's concerned that's going to scare away tenants because he has to disclose that. Presumably you'd want signage, and my client's extremely concerned that that's going to have a major impact on the rentability of the building. What we would suggest is that we have a sign at the State Road entrance. It says truck entrance. We have a sign at the Winks Lane entrance that says employee entrance. That will discourage truck traffic, but it won't absolutely require, we won't be in a violation situation with the township if a truck goes in there. But it will clearly encourage all truck drivers, all traffic, as far as distinguishing between those two entranceways. And we think that is a reasonable compromise to accomplish what the township wants, which is to keep the primary entrance on State Road and to keep the cars and the trucks segregated on the site. So we think that makes sense. It's not bulletproof. I'm not going to represent you, know that it's not, but I think it's a reasonable compromise that accomplishes everybody's goals.
It's like putting in a no left turn in and people make the left turn in to the right out only, right? Okay, wait, gotcha. You finished? You guys you're done? Anybody on the board have any other questions? If there's no other questions, then the motion would be in order.
I'll make the motion we approve the project, and Mr. Pizzo, you might have to assist me here with this. First, we approve the lot line consolidation of tax parcels 2-2-79-9-4, 79-9-5, 79-9-6, 79-10, and 2-80-28. In addition, with that approval, the land development plan, final land development plan for those particular tax parcels with the following requirements. With sections, there is several will complies under Section B, Section D, Section E, and Section F. In addition, will comply to the stormwater management as required by our township engineer across the property, including the fifth parcel in the northwest corner, and in addition to the signage of truck entrance only on State Road, in addition to employee sign on Winks Lane.
Is that for both?
That's for both. I did both, yeah.
Joe, make sure we have all those other things that were discussed and approved, please.
We also had some waivers listed. Maybe we should go through these.
You want me to, I can specify those waivers?
I believe Mr. Tugmagian's motion, then, if I heard it correctly, was to grant the lot line consolidation request, and as a condition of that, a deed for the newly consolidated lot will be reviewed and approved by the township engineer and the township solicitor, and that will be recorded before or at the time the record plan is approved. That's correct, Mr. Tugmagian?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then as far as the land development, preliminary and final land development approval has been granted. As to Mr. Gann's review letter of September 12, 2018, Section D, Item 1, a fee in lieu of for the sidewalks is approved. The fee will be determined by the township engineer in his discretion. Item 2 is a will comply item. Item 3 is a waiver as indicated by the fact that this is preliminary and final approval. Item 4, the waiver is granted as requested to allow the trees as described in item 4.
Correct.
As to stormwater management, section E, item 2 is a will comply to the satisfaction of the township engineer. Will comply means that in this case, it could involve a meeting with the Bucks County Conservation District. Their approval would also be a condition of that will comply. As to item 3, the 3 requested waivers are granted, and as to those particular items, they will be permitted to be as shown on the plan.
Joe, 3A, I asked that they added approval by our engineer for the different type of piping, and the pipe would be not less than 15 inches. 15
Right.
feet.
PVC, 15 inches.
Okay.
No less than.
So that would be part of your motion, correct, Mr. Technesian?
Yes, it would.
Not less than 15 inches and to the satisfaction of the township engineer. As to item 4, that is a will comply item, and again, a note or revision to the plan will be added as necessary, again, to the satisfaction of the township engineer. As to item F, 1, 2, 3 are all comments. Item 4 is a will comply item. It should be noted that the split rail fence is no longer intended to be included on the plan, but the shadow box fence will be shown on the plan, again, to the satisfaction of the township engineer. Items 5 and 6 are both will comply items, again, to the township engineer. The applicant will comply with all of the requirements of the township fire marshal as reflected in their review letter. It should be noted that no traffic impact fee is required. As to other traffic issues, the applicant will comply with the comments of the July 20, 2018 review memo of the township traffic engineer. In addition, as reflected from the comments of this evening's meeting, the applicant will undertake off-site road improvements to State Road, specifically but not including a left turn lane into the site, a left turn lane at the intersection of Winks Lane and State Road, new signalization at Winks Lane and State Road, improvement of the turning radii, all as reflected on the plans which will be approved by the township engineer and the township traffic engineer. Additionally, the developer has agreed that it will be responsible for the construction of those off-site improvements at a cost not to exceed $450,000 of the developer's contribution. All of this, of course, is subject to approval by PennDOT. The township agrees to assist the developer in value engineering those improvements so as to reduce the estimated overall cost of construction, which at the moment is estimated at $550,000, but to reduce those costs to the extent that they can be reduced. Additionally, the township will assist the developer in the acquisition of any right-of-way, construction easements, temporary construction easements, or the like that might be necessary for the improvements that are discussed this evening. Finally, as to the access points to the property, I believe it was your motion, Mr. Togmajian, that as proposed by the developer, that signage, the plan will be revised to reflect signage at the State Road entrance, indicating that that is the truck entrance, and signage at the Winks Lane entrance to show visitors to the site that that is the employee entrance, and that the Haunted Lane access point, as already reflected by the plans, will be an emergency access point only. I believe it already has signage proposed that says do not enter, emergency access only. But in all cases, the signage will be satisfactory to the township engineer and the township traffic engineer. I think that's what you said, but I may have gotten
That
it
should
off a
sum it
little-
up.
Very good.
It's the best I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah.
I think it should be on the motion.
We need a vote, something about.
You need that in the pizza place to clean up the fence and
Right.
and has to clean up afterwards.
And in the developer's
I
agreement.
did note that.
Yes. The aspects of the off-site improvements will be incorporated into the developer's agreement for the project. Similarly, language will be included into the developer's agreement and to the plan as appropriate, indicating that the additional stormwater management facilities that are going to be constructed on what's been referred to this evening as the Pizza Pie section of the property that fronts on Winks Lane, and that the 6-foot fence would be added to keep people from dumping and otherwise accessing that piece, and that the developer will clean up and maintain the Pizza Pie slice, and that will be a covenant running with the land, language of which, again, we can place on the notes and the consolidated deed.
And you don't have to mention that they're subject to violations if they.
That's already in the Township Code of Ordinances if they violate the property maintenance code.
Okay, to add that?
Thank you. Yes, we can add that.
Okay. Do we have a second on the motion? Jesse Sloan, Mr. Sloan, second. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
But aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Paizo, before I go to the next one, we have anything that was put aside for
No, I don't believe so. I believe everything, the balance of the agenda items 12 through 19, well, actually, I apologize. I believe item 14, which is the planning module approval for Broken Goblet. I don't know that
We never received.
the paperwork which we had anticipated receiving in time for this evening's meeting, we haven't received. So that item, if we could, table to the next meeting.
I was hoping to bring you samples.
Have we received that paperwork at all? Or is it
No.
still
As
nothing
far
yet?
as I know, nothing has come in.
Okay.
There are building permits and other things relative to that building which are into the township and ongoing, but as far as the
actual
planning
planning
module,
module.
that wasn't received in time.
Okay.
Okay, number 12 on the agenda. Request for waiver of curbs and sidewalk installation subject to payment for a fee in lieu of request. Applicant Tom Snyder, Unionville Road, 2-32-97. Mr. Gans.
Yes, I placed in front of you a map of the area. It's a very strange tract of land, very odd-shaped lots. One lot fronts totally on Humeville Road. The other lot with all the jagged lines fronts on the corner of Humeville and Woodbine. So the first one is the request for curb and sidewalk on Humeville Road parcel. They're requesting a waiver of curbs and sidewalks because none appear in the area. They are in agreement of paying a fee in lieu of in the amount of $2,550.
Without a building plan, they're going to pay money in advance. I mean, I guess you can't complain about that, right? Gotcha.
Ron, where is it? Humeville and what?
Humeville and Woodbine. It's right across from the corner of the golf course.
It's that weird lot next to Charlie
Okay.
Combat's lot.
You should have do you want a map?
I know where it is. No, I know where it is. I got it.
I have
Got
a
it.
question.
Go ahead.
I want to speak by
All
myself.
right, put a form of motion that...
Hold on a second. Joe has a question.
Who's got a question?
Joe
I have a
Knowles.
question.
You speaking still?
I have to speak by myself. I'm trying to have a question, okay? I'm still confused about, I'm very familiar with the lot, okay?
Yes.
But what is he paying curbs and sidewalks on? Because there's
there's a, what I would consider a side lot, yeah, just this? Just that. Just, well, this is on
One
Humeville too.
that, one that fronts only on Humeville Road.
Right now, we're just talking. Okay, well, there's two lots in.
Humeville Road is first.
Humeville
Okay, so-
Road is
oh,
first.
That's considered the Woodbine one?
No, this is Humeville Road.
Yeah,
I understand the second.
they're looking at the map.
Oh, okay.
But he's not including the part of Unionville Road that's between the Woodbine lot and what you're
No,
calling the Unionville Road
the
lot.
triangular piece
Yeah,
is not
yes.
included
So why
in
does
this.
he pay for curbs along there?
Well, he's not developing it.
But-
I don't know if he owns it, but when he comes in to build a home, if he can fit one on there, he'll have to come in.
We have to ask him that.
Yes, and, right.
All right, so this is just the.
The Humeville
How many
frontage.
feet are you talking about along Unionville Road?
I'm not sure is Quentin, what was the frontage on Humeville Road for Snyder? The amount was
$2,200, so you get.
75 feet.
75 feet.
So that's a buildable lot, 75 bucks.
Yes, yes.
And no, okay, so he just built the one Unionville Road. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, go ahead, Mr. Kisselbeck.
Okay, I'd like to approve the waiver for curbs and sidewalks for Mr. Thomas Snyder, Humeville Road, 2-32-97.
Do we have a second to the motion? Do we have a second to the motion?
Yeah, I'll second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
But aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Next one is request for waiver of curbs and sidewalk installation, subject about payment in lieu. Thomas
Yes.
Snyder, Woodbine Avenue, 2-32-99 and 2-32-100. Mr. Gans.
Yes, that's that corner piece on your map that you have there, and the,
Piece behind it?
we're requiring curbing along Woodbine Avenue because there is curbing further down, continuing up to this point. So we're requiring curbing up to the corner. And they're requesting a waiver of curb and sidewalk on Humeville and sidewalk on Woodbine Avenue. And their fee in lieu of would be $6,142.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, sorry. I'll make a motion that we waiver curbs and sidewalks along Unionville Road and just sidewalks along Woodbine for Thomas Snyder with their site they're calling Woodbine Avenue 2-32-99 and 2-32-100.
I'll second it.
Any question on the motion?
I want to make sure that that includes requiring the radius curve at the intersection for the property, as noted in Mr. Gantz's letter.
Yes, that will be required to be constructed, the radius, yes.
Should I add that to my amendment, or is that
Just to
already
make it
included?
clear.
You can say curbing, including the radius on the.
Okay, I'll add including the radius on the corner of Unionville and Woodbine.
Amended, so forth with the second.
Thank you. All in favor?
But aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 14 on the agenda, planning module for Broken Goblet. They sent us a request to postpone. We haven't gotten the paperwork, so we get a motion to move this to October 9th.
I'll make a motion that we move item number 14, the planning module Broken Goblet, to October 19th, October the 9th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Tell them to bring samples.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 15, consideration of escrow release for Somerton Valley Homes LP, release number 15, Phase 3, Carter Road and Somerton Road, tax parcel 2-6-1 and 2-7-2 in the amount of $103,874.50. Mr. Gans.
Yes, bear with me a second. For some reason, I don't have phase 3. Yeah, phase 3. Yes, sir, they requested an amount of $113,861.50. We are recommending a release of $103,874.50, subject to audit by the Finance Department.
I'm confused. Your letter says the amount requested was $113,861.50. On the last page of this, the tabulation of values, that's not what's listed here. It says $117,486.50.
Okay, Mr. Neeraj?
That was the amount requested. He's releasing, recommended releases next to
No,
that.
I understand that, but the amount requested here and here on the first page and the last page do not match.
Oh, yeah,
On your tabulation, it's 117, and on the, this might be a typo.
the written part's wrong.
Yeah, is this the correct one?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You have to add this up.
Yeah.
That's what it adds up.
The typographical error is on the memo.
Okay.
It should be $117,486.50 was requested.
Can I just bring up an issue with all three of these? And I know we had some discussion earlier in the meeting on these, as far as some of this being kind of sent to phase 3. And being that we already approved the extension, in my mind, I feel like we should postpone the decision on this until that audit is done, because if we were to approve this, we're looking at roughly $250,000 that's remaining in escrow for this particular project, and are we confident that that's going to be enough in case we run into any issues?
I am confident, and we actually gave the extension only to section 2. The release is for phase 3, the one that actually had some funds released. And
If the work is done and completed and they request it, I don't see how we can not give it to them. I mean,
that's correct.
I think that we're putting ourselves out for legal action, Joe.
Well, but we're still requiring an audit to be completed, though, with the, right, and the audit would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the audit would consist of all 3 phases.
Yes, these will all be sent to the finance department, and they will check what we have in each balance of each escrow.
And if there's a mistake, right,
And if there's not enough funds for what we're asking for, that flag would be waved.
And it goes back to us.
That's how the audit, and plus, we monitor it ourselves. And if there's not, they can only ask for what's in the escrow. If
Well,
they ask for more, it doesn't get released.
Well, you get a good point there. I mean, line item number 3 on this, there's a footnote that says no monies are remaining in line item. Are you saying that they're requesting money that they've already been paid?
Which item was that?
Temporary seed lots, ROW open spaces.
Which,
Phase 3.
Phase 3?
Yeah. It's line item
Footnote
3, footnote 2.
No monies are remaining in this item. That would be temporary seeding of right-of-way and open spaces. Right, there is no funds remaining, so we release nothing.
So pretty much what we do is we do an Excel spreadsheet for each release for each project. In this case, it would be 3 different phases of the same project.
Right.
So if they ask for, if their numbers might come up that says we have $50 in this line item, if we've already released that money and our spreadsheet says 0, then we don't release anything.
Okay, so,
And that happens quite often.
It happens often.
well, and that's all I'm asking is, are they asking for money that they've already been paid on this line item, it sounds like?
Right.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, if there's no more questions, motion would be in order.
All right, subject to audit, I'd like to approve the escrow release phase number 3. Agenda item number 15 is recommended by Harold W. Gans, September 11, 2018.
We have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, ayes have it, 5-0. Number 16 on the agenda, consider escrow release Somerton Valley Homes LP, release number 20, phase 2, Carter Road in Somerton, 2-6-1, 2-7-2. Mr. Gans.
Yeah, I want to make a quick correction on the memorandum for this one. Second line of the first paragraph, it says based on the above, it should be based on the attached tabulation. We do not recommend the release. So we're recommending a release of 0.
So instead of going to the township, say attached.
Attached
Yes,
tabulation,
remaining.
yes.
0, we can afford that. I'll put that in form of a motion.
I will second it.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 17 on the agenda, consideration of an escrow release, Somerton Valley Homes release, number 15, Phase 1, Carter Road, Somerton Road, 2-6-1 and 2-7-2.
Same comment regarding the typographical change, and the amount is 0, and we recommend releasing 0.
I'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
Any questions on the motion?
Yeah, I would just reiterate the question I had earlier in the evening. Because the only thing left on this is contingency, that means what really this is, it's all the paving work that we discussed earlier, and that's actually pushed into the scope of Phase 3. And the plan is to not release this contingency until all 3 phases are complete. Is that correct?
And that's the final.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so is that phase 1 we're
This is
referring?
Yes,
Phase 1.
Phase 1.
Right, so phase 1's pretty much complete except for some minor, we have one issue in the detention basin in phase 1 that we're getting corrected now. We had a meeting with the conservation district probably 3 weeks ago on this
Okay.
one. And there's some miscellaneous cleanup and some touch-up grading work. Other than that, then it's pretty much, everything else is in phase 3 in escrow.
Okay, so I guess what is,
We're holding contingency for all remaining punch list items.
so is the intent to hold on to this contingency until all of the paving work that was moved to Phase 3 is
No,
complete?
'cause that money's
Or
already-
just to address the punch list items that you
Correct,
mentioned?
correct.
Got it.
So money
Okay.
that they've already been released that didn't, that's not working satisfactorily now, we're
Yeah.
holding that as our contingency item, basically. So in case they don't fulfill cleaning up the site, removing some silt fence, fixing the basin, we can use that, I believe there's $20,000 or change
Roughly,
in
yeah.
there to go in there and clean that and make everything right.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it, 5-0. Number 18 on the agenda, public comment. Is there anyone that can come forward with any public comment? Seeing no one come forward. Number 19 on the agenda, other business from supporting personnel. Mr. Gans, you have a folder.
Yeah, you have a folder on other business. This was a complaint that came up at the last meeting from a Mr. George Anderson at 866 Mill Road. This memo simply states that we're addressing the removal of the sign from the site triangle and the right-of-way. And we're investigating the parking in the rear. It appears that the business back there has placed some of his parking on the Paper Street area. So we're going to make sure he doesn't have some waiver to do that. If not, we'll have him move the cars off the paved area.
So he was correct about the sign, wasn't he?
Oh, yes, yes.
You're keeping in touch with Mr. Anderson about what's going on?
Yes, Quentin's been in touch.
Anything else, Ron?
No, sir?
Okay, Mr. Pizzo.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Sloan?
I had one issue that came up, and some residents had come forward to me about the breezeways or the easements between the townhouses are not being maintained and littered and trash. Can we send somebody out to inspect those?
If you give the addresses to Mr. Neron, we'll...
we would need locations.
Specific locations? Okay, let me see what I can find, and I'll forward it to you.
Do you know what developments they are? Like what?
I said the coves.
Codes?
Oh,
Yeah.
road, yeah.
I think that's,
It's easier in the valley, so-
no, that's, so the code, I figured that's pretty straightforward, they can go through and inspect that.
Probably, you could just do those.
Okay,
I'll notify the director of building department.
thank you.
That's what I said.
Mr. Cognation?
I have 3 items. The first item, Mr. Pizzo, I have a question for you. When we send out notices to residents to clean up particular property that lies along the easement, is there a particular law or, I don't know, a law or something that regulates how much time we should be giving these residents?
In some cases, our ordinances specify times, but in most cases, when it comes to a property maintenance citation, the process is started by the notice of violation. The notice of violation should give a reasonable amount of time to address whatever the nature of the violation is. So in some cases, it could be 10 days, in some cases 14, in most cases 30 if it's something that's going to involve some amount of work. So I believe that the property maintenance code gives the inspector some discretion in that regard. If it's obviously a health, safety, and welfare issue that requires immediate attention, the amount of time that the code enforcement officer will give will be shorter. We can't really issue notices of violation that say immediately, but we can say immediately and in no case less than or more than X number of days. If we just put immediately, then if and when it gets to a judge, we've got a little bit of a problem because we do have to afford some reasonable amount of time. If it's really a health, safety, and welfare issue of the nature of which that it requires, immediate remedial action by the township or someone, we might issue something that says 24, 48 hours, and thereafter perhaps go right to court, depending on what it is. So
Okay, yeah.
it's a fairly long-winded way of saying it all depends on what it is we're talking about.
Okay, I mean, there's a situation where we sent out notices. There was no argument over the work needing to be done by the residents. And let me also add this, is that once I started to address it with administration, they were looking to address the issue or my concern. But I guess I'm just bringing up the question because in this particular example, we only provided 7 days. And that was over the course of Labor Day weekend, and I had some concern about that. One, I mean, there are people on vacation, they're on holiday, so and then to give them 7 days over a week that we had some significant heat, I just think was somewhat unreasonable.
Again, not knowing all of the terms, it may be, it may not be. I'll give our code enforcement people the benefit of the doubt that they're exercising discretion. They deal with a lot of these complaints every day. If you're talking about grass that's already a foot high, for instance, and it really doesn't take 7 days to get it cut, I think 7 days is probably a reasonable amount of time, particularly if you're the neighbor living next door to it and watching it get another few inches higher. If it's making some sort of a repair that's going to take time for you to hire a contractor to come out and do it, 7 days probably isn't a sufficient amount of time. But again, it's...
And I'm referring to Old Street Road. And there was concern about safety too as well, trying to do it on that road and based off of, and I was on that street and I did see that there were cars going 40, 50 or plus miles an hour on that particular road. And at this point, I'm not bringing up the safety issue, it's just the concerning about the fact that we only gave 7 days. And keep in mind is that particular location had a lot of water when I was out there. It's an embankment, so it's quite difficult to try to address some of that. So I just felt like we probably should have given more than 7 days, especially over the fact that it was a holiday weekend. And you can't necessarily guarantee that the people are going to be home. People are taking a week vacation during that time, and if they took the full week, well, then certainly they're not going to be able to address it. And then also people work too as well. So just a number of different factors going on, whereas I just felt like maybe we should have provided that 30 days to see that work through.
Again,
Did you tell us what work we're talking about? I missed it.
It's growth on the back part of the properties, shrubbery, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Again, I would be remiss to question our code enforcement people are tasked with a lot of challenging situations when we receive a neighbor complaint or a resident complaint or a complaint from a councilman, they go out, they investigate, they issue the proper notice as a violation. They typically provide a reasonable amount of time, again, weighing the amount of time necessary to abate the nuisance versus the, the health, safety, and welfare aspects of the nuisance itself. And again, keep in mind, the township, for as long as I've been solicitor, has always approached property violations from the aspect that we want compliance more than we want fines. If there's something out there and it's creating a quality of life problem for, the 60,000 residents of this community, we want it fixed. We don't want to have to drag a resident in front of DJ Falcone or DJ Gallagher for the purposes of getting 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever it may be number of fines. Most, if when the inspector goes out to re-inspect, if there's been significant work toward compliance during the period of time that the code officer has given, or if there's some extenuating circumstance that when the code official goes back out and the neighbor and the resident says, here's what happened. It was Labor Day weekend. I couldn't get somebody to come out, but I'm going to have somebody here in the next 5 days. I think more often than not, and Mr. Neron will correct me if anything I've said is wrong, the code official is going to say, fine, 5 more days. But that's, on day 6, you can expect we'll be in front of Judge Falcone. So,
but this situation was not a health and welfare issue. It didn't affect the quality of life for 60,000 people, and I just feel like the initial notice should have went out providing the 30 days. I want them to rescind the notice. I mean, well, okay, so out of all the streets.
You have laws, so you're going to change the laws of what
I'm not, wait, but my first question to Mr. Pizzo was, is it a law? And
he said yes.
It's not, though.
It is. We have a code for it.
But there is nothing that states how long we can give them notice. And it was just wrong that we gave them 7 days over a holiday weekend.
So if you give them 30 days?
Yes, absolutely. They're not arguing the work has to be done. Yeah.
One of the things that I know that code enforcement does do, if they do give a short notice, like on 7 days, they're looking for the resident or property owner to contact them. If they were, like in this case, a holiday weekend, I know that if they were to call in within that 7-day period, talk to the inspector probably would have given them another 10 days or 2 weeks, depending on what they would have needed. The real reason is to get them to communicate in just so they know that there's something that's got to be done. A lot of times what happens in this case, like I said, if it was a grass complaint, and you give, like you said, 30 days, that 30 days is just going to keep growing. Now, it could be an abandoned property. There's different situations for every situation we have. So I know a lot of times they're just looking for communication, and I know each inspector does work with any homeowner that comes in or calls in because they ask for additional time to get things done, depending on what the case may be.
Okay, well, I can confirm that happened because it went through me. And then I went to Deb and addressed it. And what happens at that point, I don't know. But it went through me. That's the way the channel went. And we still didn't give them the additional time that they were looking for. They weren't arguing whether the work needed to be done. It was more of a safety concern and just providing the extra time. And sure enough, the 8th day, they got a $690 fine, which I could really like. I would like to know how are we justifying that cost. And I'm not going to get into that with this meeting. But all I'm saying at this point is that I think we need to give them the 30 days. And to that point, there's only 2 homes on that street now that have not completed the work. And I don't believe that saying, well, the court notice or the court hearing now is in 20 days, so you have 20 days now. Really, we should rescind the notice, send another notice providing an initial 30 days to get the work done, and then at that point, then send them the fine.
Well, I'm not sure who would have fined them from the township. I think that's really up to the judges, not the township
Well, but the township
judge
is the one
sets
that
the fines, not the township.
Right.
And the judge, I shouldn't say sets, the judge imposes the fines. Township has no ability to independently.
So the judge is the one that's determining the fine. Okay, that's fine, but here or not, I still feel that the 30 days should have been provided.
And then at the end of 30 days, when they don't do anything, and then should we give another 30 days?
No, I understand there's a limit. Joe, it was Labor Day weekend, too.
I understand on that
Yeah.
one particular one.
Yeah.
But we have people that complain they have grass that's 6 feet high because the person that lived there passed away. Nobody's cutting the grass. We cite the property, 30 days later, it's still not done. 30 days later, we end up having to go in and cut it and lean the house. There's different
Understood.
situation. I think our guys and girls do a great job trying not to harass people, but maybe this is one that went through the cracks. But
Yeah, and to Mr. Pizzo's point, I think it's based off of the situation. And in this situation, there was no health and welfare issue. I could still drive down the road easily. I mean, yes, was it encroaching the easement? Yes. Were they arguing over whether the work needed to be done? No. It's just a matter of then giving them the ample time to do it.
Well, Mr. Neron isn't here to answer that kind of question.
But the other thing too is who decides what ample time is? The township or the person that's got the violation?
I think it's clear that 7 days over a holiday weekend is not enough time. And I think that's the issue on this particular case, yeah.
This one fell through the cracks, should never happen. But we have people all the time trying to do the things that need to be done. Yeah. And you can't say, okay, 30 days, all right, you didn't do the 30 days, we'll give you another 30 days.
No, I understand that.
No one's saying that
No,
tonight.
I understand that.
I understand the 7 days thing, so, I mean, I don't.
So I guess, do I have to put a motion then to, because I want the,
At this point, it's in the judge's hand now.
That's nothing to do with us. We don't make.
Mr. Pizzo, can you look into whether they were fined or?
the fines were sent out after the 7th day.
Well, again, the process would be that they would receive a notice of violation. Depending on what they do within that period of time, the code official can issue a second notice of violation, depending on what has transpired. Again, this isn't cookbook. The code officials are, at the end of the day, trying to work with the residents to get compliance and not to have to take them in front of the local district justice. At whatever point in time the notice of violation process has exhausted itself and the township hasn't gotten compliance, then a citation is filed with the district justice. The hearing date is set. Now, in my experience, if between the date of the hearing and any time prior to the date of the hearing, if the property is brought into compliance, then the property's been brought into compliance, and the township will not move forward with the hearing.
It's not a fine that actually gets issued in 7 days.
30 days or 45 days.
You really have to be ignoring the township for it to get to the point that a fine is issued. You really have to be ignoring the township and not working with the code official to get a fine from the township.
Let's find out.
I can tell you, Mr. President.
We're not going to keep going on with this because it's not something that we can do. Let's find out what happened. Let's find so it doesn't happen again. So I've asked Mr. Quinton to find out what's going on, find out how this happened. Ask Mr. Heil, how did this happen? It should never happen again. But we don't make motions and tell people what to do with because we're not with the administration. We make laws. We don't run the administration.
Well, then I could put a motion on the floor saying that we would do 30 days across the board.
You can't put a motion on the floor. It has nothing to do with us. It's got to be something that is advertised and on the agenda and done. So you can't do it tonight.
Okay, so we'll look into that issue?
Yeah, no, I don't have an address, so I'm just going to look at everything on Dresser.
It was Dresser Road, right? We sent the notices to Dresser Road.
I know everything went out on Dresser, so I can just look and find out from where. I know one inspector was handling most of it.
Yeah.
So I can find out from
And
there.
I think there's only 2 properties that actually had not finished the work from as the latest.
Ask Mr. Heil or whoever the inspector is to get back to Mr. Combination, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
The second point I had was I know I've been bringing up the boards and council item. I didn't know if there was, could we possibly just add that as a discussion point for the next agenda meeting?
Give me something in writing, what you want to do. You're just not putting something out there when I don't know what you're looking to do. Give me something in writing.
I did.
You didn't?
Yes. All right, I'll state it in the form of the request to add it to the agenda.
What was the email? I'm sorry, didn't hear it.
It was a change to the ordinance, sections 2-11 and section 2-112, amending the ordinance or adding a couple items onto that for requirement.
This is with respect to the advisory board.
Yep.
That's fine. Give me a formal, I just thought there was something for information, not asking me personally to put it on the agenda.
Gotcha.
So send it to me and I'll be more than happy to.
Will do, thank you. And then
I don't think I got an email to that effect.
It went up.
I get a lot of emails.
I didn't
Some
see
might-
It went out maybe a month or
Some
so
look at
ago.
information.
I didn't see it, or I didn't see it.
And just a third point,
Nor
fire,
I.
Check my email, but I didn't get it.
just a third point, fire, do we know what's going on with firefighters field, the building that's there?
I know nothing about it.
As to what?
I don't know what's happening with it. Is it in use? Who's using it? What purpose?
The side?
Storage.
Side one?
Yeah.
That's township. Yeah, that's, I think Parks and Recreation and Building and Planning are using that building.
Okay.
Right, one of firefighters field.
I'm not sure what departments use it, but I know it's in use by the township.
Yes.
Yeah, storage.
It's storage and.
For the township?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I've encountered a situation where someone was saying that they were renting space there.
No, we wouldn't be renting space to anybody, we couldn't. If
Well,
they're doing it, find out who it is, because maybe they're,
I didn't get her name, but she was there unlocking the gate, and she had told me that she's renting space there.
well, we need to know who it is, because they shouldn't be renting space.
Right, that was my point.
I know when I was over there, building and planning, the road department and Parks and Rec were using it for storage and things, so, yes.
All right, I'll put that request in. That was all. Thank you.
Okay.
Is it cash payments?
Mr. Kisselback?
Well. It's not 12 yet? My God, I'm surprised. Yeah, I don't blame you. I just want to wish all our Jewish friends from my family, hearts and prayers to you, as now Kippur is just in anticipation a day or two away. God bless you.
My Flyers had their first exhibition game. Chuck Chip excited again, so hopefully the Phillies will do good. Carson Wentz is starting on Sunday, so hopefully we'll have sports celebrate. Our next meeting will be on October 9th. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
Second?